All right, so welcome everybody to the day 2 workshop for Buddies of Budgie. In this workshop, we are going to be going over a few items that we weren't able to cover from day 1 because these are time gated to 3 hours. So the first one being organization structure, and I will actually go ahead and share my window, which will be this Google Meet window, and then it will be this. So you could see here we have this organization structure where we try to break down sort of these team-oriented responsibilities and sort of like what those tasks would be and then what the team would be, or you know a certain topic like billing and then who individually would be dealing with that. We didn't touch too much on how we organize the information and communicate it. And that's okay because that's something that we could touch on for Budgie 10 and Budgie 11. So during this workshop as well. So if I zoom in here, we have some website ideas. We have some stuff like roadmaps and GitHub and documentation center and locale and so on and so forth. So these are all things that we can cover in a moment. Then of course on this news section we have the same like sort of description of the purpose, which is sort of discussing the development around Budgie 10, high levels for Budgie 11, sort of transparency in its development, what our goals, the ideas are for Budgie 10 and 11, and a couple important things are, you know, what needs to happen for Budgie 10 to be considered properly complete and really have the majority of our time investment then go into 11. And then what needs to exist for like the minimum viable product for 11. So yeah, and then we have a bunch of like to-dos up here. I quickly like threw a couple of these together just to give people an idea what it could be like. For 11, obviously there isn't anything yet, besides like some like abstract ideas on how it should be structured. But we could fill that out as we go, and chances are we'll be using other road mapping tools rather than this Kanban board. So yeah, and also I should probably mute Fostodon because it's blooping at me. Okay, so before we get started though, I figured it would be a good opportunity to actually introduce ourselves as well for anybody that happens across day 1 or day 2 and they haven't watched day 1. So I'm going to go ahead and stop presenting real quick and we could just introduce ourselves. So I will go ahead and start real quick. So my name is Joshua Strobel. I am the BDFL of Budgie Desktop. I've been working on Budgie for 5-6 years now. And I was originally one of the individuals that was the experience lead for Solus, but then I departed the team in January to focus on Budgie and other things, and obviously other reasons for leaving, but the benefit of leaving is the ability to focus more on Budgie development. And yeah, that's basically what I do in terms of what I do outside of open source stuff. I am a software developer at a consultancy and software development company called Futurus, and I mostly focus on full stack development and sort of cloud infrastructure orchestration there. So yeah, let's go ahead and go to Campbell Jones, aka Cerbit.
As Josh just said, I'm Cerbit Campbell Jones. I started working on Budgie probably sometime around 2019, just because I saw I was bored and I saw some things I wanted to improve because I had nothing better to do. And I'd already loved Budgie since I started with it on Solus, and I just decided to keep going. So right now since joining Buddies of Budgie, I've kind of refined the internal theme to fit a bit better with modern standards until Josh does his full overhaul. And right now I'm working on a sort of concept for a new network indicator to replace NM applet and a new status notifier tray to hopefully replace the current XMBed one so we can move forward into Wayland territory with Budgie 11.
Very nice. Yeah, I look forward to actually talking a bit about the network applet stuff because I feel like there might be a good opportunity to leverage some of the work the fantastic people at Ubuntu Budgie have done on their network applet. So, we might not want to leverage Granite, which I believe their applet leverages because it's a fork from Elementary. But I think that it would provide a good basis for that as well, if that's something you're interested in, of course. But yeah, let's go ahead and continue on with Julian.
So I'm Julian. I've been using Budgie since I think almost the same as Campbell, so 2019. And I've also occasionally contributed to the code base. Right now, I'm working on simple task lists, and I hope to get that in 10.7. But I really need to resume work on that. So yeah, other than that, I'm a software developer at a company called Viva Systems, medical cloud stuff. So yeah, that's basically me.
And what about you, Evan?
Hello, I'm Evan Maddock. I've been working on Solus since I think also around 2019, somewhere around there. Doing notification stuff, low quality of life stuff. And currently I've been working on the new Budgie menu, which I think is waiting for a few things to get done. And
Yep, waiting for me to get off my butt and finish up a couple things on there. Yeah.
all things in good time.
All right. Well, with that intro out of the way, let's go ahead and dive right in. So I'm going to start presenting again, just for the sake of the recording for Google Meet. So before we dive into Budgie stuff, which I know would be super exciting, there is one thing that we do need to work on at the very least, and that's this organization structure. So I preempted it before the workshop yesterday with a couple things. So one being like this responsibility of packaging Budgie Desktop and Budgie Control Center and so on various operating systems. So that's sort of a task here effectively, and then breaking it down into the team. So actually this should really be like team tasks really, and then individual responsibilities / tasks, something like that. So with packaging, I think an idea of mine would be to have like a packaging and distribution team. So we're able to like add people to that team and communicate that on like the website as an example, so people understand, okay, if I'm using Solus, this is the individual to actually contact regarding any issues there, or in the case of like Debian or Ubuntu, it'd be David. And then as you could see on this note, and I keep trying to zoom in, but it doesn't actually want to increase the size of this at all, which is really annoying. But if you click the comment, it breaks out, and you could see is responsible for the packaging of Budgie Desktop and the macrocosm of components for various operating systems. So it could be broken down into individual responsibilities for a specific operating system. So I have started doing the packaging for Fedora is more or less complete. However, I don't really feel comfortable exposing it to a bunch of users without properly dogfooding it. And in order to properly dogfood it, I need to actually use it on Fedora on a day-to-day basis. So what that means is actually I'm going to be switching over my desktop and my work laptop over to Fedora. At the moment, they run EndeavourOS, which is a fantastic operating system. Like, I'm literally just switching over to Fedora because of the fact that I want to actively dogfood Budgie under that. And then my personal laptop, which currently runs Fedora, is actually what then is going to be using EndeavourOS. But I think that's okay because Sarabit, aka Campbell, is already actively using EndeavourOS and Arch, and it has maintainer access to, I think, all or the majority, and you could correct me if I'm wrong here, of the AUR packages. And
most of them, not all of them, but most of them.
Yeah, so hopefully we can get all of them sorted for you, and then hopefully when whatever criteria is required for you to become quote unquote a trusted user for Arch, that that you're able to get that and be able to maintain it under Arch, of course, assuming you actually want that responsibility. No comment.
Maybe. Yeah. We'll see. I mean, the ideal situation would be one where they can manage it on their own
yes.
and update things on time. But if that's not possible, then yeah, I would be.
Yeah, which
fine with
seems to
handling
not be
that.
possible
At
because
the moment, yeah, things are a little delayed.
yes,
At least in this case, it would be managing 4 packages that aren't updated super often, rather than the ones I was maintaining with Solus.
yep. So, and then we have Evan, who took over my responsibility when I departed Solus. So he is now the package maintainer for Budgie Desktop. And have you also packaged Budgie Control Center and all that? I want to say you have. But
Yes.
yeah, I
Yeah,
figured
all
you
of
did.
it's in Budgie.
Yeah.
Or Solus, rather.
Yeah. So as far as I'm aware, you still are or still intend on using Solus, and therefore, I think it's reasonable to say you will probably continue to be the Solus maintainer there. And regardless, there are plenty of people there that are also capable of maintaining and updating it too. I think everybody here knows that the packaging format for Solus is very simplistic and easy to use, as opposed to the Fedora one, which spec is not my favorite, I have to say. But it could be worse. And then David, who couldn't make it to the workshop today, which is perfectly fine. He has been maintaining it for Debian and Ubuntu for years because he is the lead for the Ubuntu Budgie project. And he has done an absolutely fantastic job with that. Like, I don't have any complaints about his maintainership of that. Also, something I noted here was I did at the start of the year try to reach out to GMBR3 from OpenSUSE, aka, well, and also like Gecko Linux, because he maintains Budgie Desktop there. I haven't heard a response, but I'm going to try again because, you know, it's like start of the new year, people on holidays and lots of stuff going on. So it's probably just got like buried in mail or something. So I'm going to try reaching out so that way we are able to make sure that they have a voice in the Buddies of Budgie community, and that we're able to really sync up closely with them in terms of maintenance of Budgie Desktop and the related components in OpenSUSE and Gecko Linux. I also put here, as far as I'm aware, Manjaro Budgie is dead. That was like the last thing I heard about it. I haven't really followed it too closely. I don't know if there's somebody out in the world there that might watch this, that might be interested in it. It might be worth us creating like some sort of task or issue on our GitHub, and we could talk about that in a little bit for like trying to communicate that. And then Julian, if I remember correctly, you were thinking about switching over to Void. Was that correct?
Yeah, I tried. Didn't really like the package management system, so I quickly left. So at the moment, I'm on Fedora as well.
Okay. Gotcha. All right. Yeah. So I wasn't sure if you were still if you're planning on using Void or if you had switched or what the status was. Yeah. A couple of things that I'm sure would be quite popular with people is Void and NixOS, which are here. And I know you probably can't see it on the actual stream, so sorry, but it says Void ? And NixOS ? There.
So I'm sorry to interrupt. On the note
go
of Manjaro Budgie, I just looked at the website, and they do have a download for Manjaro Budgie 21.2.5, which is not the same as the current XFCE version that Manjaro has. So it looks like at least someone's still updating the community ISOs. I just don't know who.
Okay. Yeah, well, I guess that's definitely something we need to dig into, because obviously we want to make sure Budgie is available everywhere it could possibly be available, because it's the best desktop environment. So why rob somebody of the opportunity to use Budgie on their favorite operating system? So yeah.
But yeah, continue.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that was really it in terms of packaging and distribution. So the main objective is just to sort of try to distill this down into like who's responsible for what, or what teams are responsible for what, and try to figure out a way to cleanly communicate that on the main site, as an example, whether that's on the About page or a documentation center or what have you. So that way people are aware who the point of contacts are, and hopefully generate or hopefully reduce the amount of noise that might otherwise occur if somebody was to report a OS specific issue or distribution, like a packaging issue, like on our issue tracker instead of their respective operating system. So that was kind of the idea here. Of course, actually I forgot to copy some cards over, so let me go ahead and do that. I'm gonna copy them here. So something I would also like to hear is what sort of tasks and responsibilities do you think really exist in the context of Buddies of Budgie? So for example, another one I could think of is like web dev slash I would say DevOps. So this is like people that would participate in the development of, oh, that's a good one. Yeah, release tagging. Yep. And sort of the management and orchestration of that sort of thing. So I think another team-oriented task that would be a good one is probably, at least in my opinion, like marketing.
Okay, that's the same then.
Social. Oh, release promotion. Nice. Social networking. Whether or not, actually, I'm going to put it somewhere in the middle here because I don't know if these are sort of the same. If we want them to be individual responsibilities or what have you, because I don't know how many people besides me really want to actually go on podcasts and try to speak on behalf of the organization and that sort of stuff. So I'm going to have it in the middle for now. And do let me know on the stream if you could see everything okay. So, or if I need to zoom in more when possible. A dog fooding blog? Oh, so actually that's a good one. So I would say documentation. And maybe content writing. Because I feel like marketing and all that could... let me create another card for this as well. So it would be spokesperson, like for podcasting. Which I will actually be going on a podcast in theory soon, TM as well. When A-Linux says that little best desktop comment just woke me up. Hi, I have the stream in the background while in bed. Nice. So we have some really good ones so far.
I wouldn't be opposed to going on a podcast to talk about Budgie and the initiatives we're doing. The only concern for me would be saying something that bleeds into personal beliefs and not into what we're doing.
I mean, we all have our own personal viewpoints as well. So really, it's just like making sure that we communicate, this is my personal belief or opinion and not representative of the project. And then, libidweta is insert adjective here that won't be used on stream. Like that sort of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
All right. PR review, that's good. Let's see. The L word. I assume you mean the word lit. It's lit AF. Yeah, okay. So we have that. We're going to have also invoice and...
No, he means the L word is libidweta.
Yeah. Invoicing and reimbursement handling. We could decide sort of where where that resides. Okay. Yeah, some good ones so far. Make sure these are locked. Yeah. Okay. Anybody have any other ideas here? Okay. All right, so I guess let's go ahead and start diving right in. So I wrote web dev and DevOps because obviously, you know, not everybody has that as their particular skill set or even desires using a particular set of technology, like for instance, like TypeScript and React and, you know, Kubernetes and Terraform and that sort of stuff. And or they don't feel like they're currently qualified and feel like they would want to like brush up on that. So yeah, for me, I think it would be good to have a dedicated team for this because, I mean, even if it involves me training people to some degree, and also it's sort of a learning opportunity for me in the form of like Terraform and Kubernetes still. But when it comes to the web development, having a team that's able to actually respond to issues would be ideal. And also make sure that there's any sort of web-based technology that we need to even facilitate like Budgie stuff. You know, like if we want to have an API that the Budgie desktop could tie into or call to like grab a synopsis of certain release information or what have you, like having a team around that I think would be logical. And I also wrote content writing. I wrote content writing because I sort of treat that a bit differently than like documentation and dog fooding, in the sense that actually I should maybe be more granular. Main site content writing, so like blog posts, and that doesn't have to necessarily be released blog posts. It could be stuff like, you know, tips and tricks for using Budgie or anything of that sort. Then documentation. Let me actually open up my phone because I was in bed at the time when I was looking at the documentation stuff, trying to figure out what we should use. Let me figure out where it was. But there is a React and JSX, well, TSX implementation. If I documentation alternative to Gitbook is how I found it. Because the more I think about it, the more I'm like, do I personally need to like implement a new documentation center? Probably not, especially when, let me find out where it was. Docusaurus. Let me go ahead and developed by Facebook, which, I mean, who cares? Let me go ahead and I will post a link actually to this, both in Twitch as well as putting a link here. Next, and putting a link also in Matrix, because you know people there will have absolutely no context and it'll be very confusing for them. So the idea was like documentation writing and also trying to remain cognizant of the fact that we will want to support multiple languages. So the idea, at least, was we could use Docusaurus because it provides a nice user interface, in my opinion, for generalized documentation, for API documentation as well, being able to segment that stuff out and obviously provide us a little bit of flexibility. And they have some features where we could tie into search and all that. So, but regardless, I think it's obvious we would need a team for that, because I don't know about you, but I don't speak every language in the world. So making sure that there's people on the team that are able to write content or convert translations for various content pieces into their respective language would certainly be good. And of course, documentation should always be up to date and a living document. So having a team that's able to actually a team that's able to do that would be certainly ideal. But yeah, actually, translation is a good one. Yeah, thank you. So, Sarabit, do you want to go over the cards that you wrote?
Yeah. I think release tagging is a little nebulous because I think, well, like, David's handling tagging releases for Budgie Control Center, and I'm at this point kind of handling the releases for Budgie Screensaver if they need to happen. But ultimately, I think that tagging releases should not strictly be an individual thing. Like if someone needs to tag a bug fix release for something extremely critical, then I think realistically any of us should be able to do that so long as we have the necessary practices set up and we all know the release workflow. Issue and PR triaging, I think realistically any of us can do that.
Yeah,
so long
that's
as we
already set up
understand the
through.
processes.
Yeah, that's already set up through GitHub. So.
Same thing with PR review to an extent. I think it's a little more nebulous just because some of us have more expertise on different parts of the code base, so we might be better equipped to handle different PRs of certain types. Yeah. And then translation we have set up through TransFX, if I'm not mistaken. So that's not just like a core developers thing. That's kind of an everyone thing.
That's a good one. And we have this dog fooding blog and release promotion. I'm not sure who wrote that. If you want to cover that.
Yeah, so dog fooding blog is just, we might have different content that we want to have on the blogs, be it release, and then join release promotion. But we can also have like some stuff. For example, Campbell might want to do a technical write-up about the new tray or all that kind of stuff. So I think it's a team responsibility because we can all create content for that.
Yeah, and with the way things are set up, is at the moment we have the main site, which then leverages Ghost as its like headless CMS. Although it's not technically headless because it has its own UI, but we use the content API for like the main site, but it's like pretty trivial to add people to Ghost so people can write up content. I think that would be valuable to do. I completely agree. So having a team that is able to actually create content that is also kind of separate from web dev as well, because it's not necessary, like you don't necessarily have to be a web developer to write blog posts. So just making sure that the pipeline is set up correctly there is sort of, I guess, part of the DevOps team. And then you also had release promotion over here.
Yeah, so that's just advertising, be it on the blog, on social media, or all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, like, and I don't have an issue with people actually posting through the social media channels. Of course, not everybody wants to like engage on Twitter or anything of that sort, but as we talked about when it came to, where was it? Social media management here. Actually, let me, I don't know why this is over. Long press to unlock. Down here, you have this buffer and then social media management. It's not necessarily what we have to use, but it would help to facilitate release promotion as an example. So maybe having a team around that, whether or not that's like the same team, it's like packaging. I feel like that would kind of make sense because if you're the one, like, or release tagging at the very least, and I feel like maybe these go kind of hand in hand, where, if you're doing the release of something yourself, you should also then be able to promote it. But at the same time, if you're promoting it, then you should be able to write content for it, to talk about it, which means access to the main site content writing. And like, this is like kind of that pipeline that needs to exist, and making sure that people are enabled every step of the way. So yeah, and then a couple things that I covered here as well is like spokesperson person for like going on podcasts. Right now, like I think I'm probably the most logical individual that's doing that. But of course, having more people is certainly something I welcome. I mean, I can't always like jump in at like 4 a.m. my time for a podcast or something. So making sure that there's people in different time zones, or if for example, like Julianne, like there was an open source podcast in like French as an example, it would make the most sense for you to go on and speak French because I don't. So, but whether or not we want that to be like a team oriented task, or just have like a couple individuals that are capable of having this task, like I don't know if we need an entire team built around that, but that's certainly worth thinking about. Marketing and social networking kind of go hand in hand in release promotion. I'm gonna group these up if I can. Let's see. Oh, whatever. And then invoice and reimbursement handling. So this is basically the same in a lot of ways as like billing. So this is being done by me currently, which I'm perfectly happy to do. But basically, it's like we have a discussion on, okay, what's the value of this certain PR? Should there be a value associated with this and reimbursement? Me telling people I will not accept this unless you actually send me an invoice for it first. In the case of like the Budgie menu stuff, I'm pretty sure I pulled that with Cerebit as well. But so I'm happy with having this be my individual task, but making sure that more people than just myself have proper admin access. I just had temporarily set Eben Yeager, aka Evan, and Sarah, aka Gabriel Jones, as core contributors, but there's no reason why we can't have a bunch of admins. So I'm not the only individual that has access to money, because as we know from certain projects where there has been instances where only that individual had access to money, that did not pan out well. So avoiding that would be ideal. So I don't know about you guys, but I think to some degree this should be a team-oriented task that is like some sort of administrative task. What do you guys think?
I think it's probably best for you to handle the invoice and reimbursement so long as there are other people who have access to it. I guess it would just be on good faith. Like, you would be handling everything, but in case something happens, then they would be able to take over and start handling it.
So they would I would be responsible for that, but they would at the very least have administrative access.
Yeah,
Okay.
Exactly.
Yeah, that seems fine. So I'll put this sort of these two cards there. So when it comes to these other tasks, what sort of teams do we think are really involved here? Like if I put a new card sticky, for example, if you were to think about the context of release tagging and packaging and all of that, does it make sense for like release tagging to also be the same thing as packaging and distribution team? Or do we feel that there needs to be a separation of concerns there, because it might not make sense for like GMBR as an example for Gecko Linux to have the capability to tag releases and have that administrative capability? Or
I think we should keep that separated, because packaging is a responsibility that can be for people that don't directly contribute to Budgie
Sure.
to the code base. So
okay. So for like release tagging and like this issues, I feel like in the case of some of these, like these 3 cards here. I feel like we kind of already have this with the Best Buds GitHub team, where it's like this team is just kind of responsible for the general day-to-day administrative capabilities of running at least the GitHub side of things and creating releases and tagging them. Okay, cool. Go ahead and okay. Main content writing and documentation. Should these be? Well, I should say I believe these should be separate because we might not want to have somebody to have access to like documentation and also be able to just write a blog post and have that instantly go out without any review. So, like. And then the question is like when it comes to documentation with for example, with this Docusaurus, the idea of submitting documentation is just your like pull requests. So do we even need a team that's responsible for that? Or is this just sort of like an individual responsibility that is up to then anybody that submits documentation?
I made a additional card under team oriented for just stuff that we could pass, that we could make a sort of community effort like translation or
that's good. Yeah, let's go ahead and group these two up.
For documentation, we might want to have a team for that that gives the direction, because sometimes coders are not the one that write documentation the best.
This is true.
Yeah, very much not me. I hate writing documentation. I'll leave that to anyone else.
Okay, so maybe what we could consider. Already had this card. Documentation team. But yeah, we'll go ahead and have it be a dedicated team then. Move this up here. Actually gonna, if you don't mind. This over here. What we could do is sync up translation with the very least documentation with the documentation team. So these are all sort of grouped up as best buds, which is good. So dog fooding blog, I feel like this sort of is the same as main site content, because the blog feeds directly into the main content site writing. And there is actually really a way, at least as far as I'm aware from the perspective of Ghost, to really differentiate in like the blog types and permissions and that sort of thing. So I feel like maybe this should be like some sort of content creation. I don't know what the team would even be called, but
I just wonder if it would make sense to have all of like the content writing and the dog fooding stuff to be a part of marketing, social networking and stuff, because that's all kind of community engagement in my mind.
Yeah, you're right about that. Yeah. So I'll have like these cards.
Well, I'm probably spokesperson as well.
And boy, these need. I should have made the boxes bigger. This. All right. We'll get there. All right, so let's create a new card. Sticky. Just call it what? Marketing? Do we have a better name for it? I don't know.
Marketing, engagement, anything like that.
Yeah, marketing. And let's go community, engagement, and marketing. Yeah, something like that anyway. So this to here. I think this is connected, but there. Okay. And then we have web dev, DevOps. This could be sorted pretty simply with just like a GitHub team as well, that has access to a particular repo. So I'm just gonna put this under like a dedicated.
Yeah, it's the ops team.
Yeah, like web ops or infra web ops team. And those will be the people that'll have access to like the DigitalOcean team as well, because like you don't then need, for example, those that are in like the marketing team to have access to DigitalOcean or like the packaging team necessarily. So okay, then we have individual responsibilities. So far there's only billing and all that, which I think is fine. I think in some ways like hooking up like spokesperson also maybe could tie into, well, I don't know if we want to break down who would be in these teams or if we could think about that later and move on to other items, but I think this sort of gives us a good framework. What are your guys' thoughts?
I think we can just see where we want to be part of which team.
That we should make note of that, or?
Yeah, we can make note on that.
Okay.
Just to have a rough idea. It's not
Yeah.
it's not fixed or all that kind of stuff.
What we could do, I guess, let's go ahead and move these over here. Move this like down here. The graph will look a little weird, but okay. So I guess we could start making cards for ourselves and then hooking up what we should realistically be a part of. So I'm gonna do basically connecting myself everywhere. Well, I mean, translation, yeah, I guess community will go.
Okay, it's gonna be a mess.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's gonna be a complete disaster. That's probably a way better way of organizing.
Okay, we can
this, like,
change the color of the. Not sure if that's better.
technically. So I'm gonna do like. Actually, I'm gonna break this out into two. The translations is sort of two things. Like this. The reason for this is like this sort of ties into just the generalized management of transifex, as opposed to doing the translations, which is the like that would be the responsibility of the community. It would be actually providing the translations, but the general management would go to the team, which I guess technically could go to Best Buds as well if we wanted. What are you guys' thoughts there? Like, would it make sense just for everybody in Best Buds to have a transifex account that has the capabilities to actually, because it kind of ties into release tagging as well, and like issue and PR reviews, like making sure translations are set up.
I think we can just consider that everyone in best bud can can manage that because we all speak a different language.
Exactly. All right. So that should be all connected up. All right. And then I'm going to go ahead and add a card here for David, just so he isn't forgotten. He is best buds. Click that.
There, I think I got it. What color should that be?
Oh, thank you. I don't know why I was struggling with that so much. It just wasn't letting me.
Yeah, I really not want to let you do that.
I think it would make sense for him also be part of. I mean, it makes perfect sense for him to be part of the packaging distribution team, which we need more people. I'm gonna go ahead and connect up.
I guess just by virtue of the fact that I'm currently packaging Budgie Control Center, I would already be a part of that, so I'll take care of that.
Yeah, I agree. And ideally, in an ideal world, of course, if this was something you even wanted to begin with, it would be nice for you to handle the art stuff, or be one of like multiple people that are able to handle the art stuff. Just because I at least know that the quality of the packages and
It's not great. It's not great. I've raised multiple issues about the metadata over on the bug tracker.
Yeah. So. Okay, well, this is by far the prettiest looking soup of arrows and cards.
I hate it so much.
It reminds me of like a Lindsay graph of a large project.
Yeah,
it's giving me anxiety.
It looks truly awful, and I love it. And we could have just had all the cards below here, but nope, individuals.
Yep.
All right, well, that's pretty good. So, Julianne, it looks like you are marked here as Best Buds, Documentation Team, and Infra. Sarah, looks like you are Packaging, Community, Best Buds. I'm part of all the things because, well, yeah. Well, and then Evan, you are part of Best Buds and Packaging. Makes sense. Although in a way, you're kind of part of the community engagement and marketing because you engage with people on the Souls forums, I would hope.
No, I didn't think of that, yeah.
And David is actually, I should add a card for him here too. They would. No, what the? Here? No. Okay. Wow. It's finally letting me. If I can now scroll out. No. Okay. Right. Well, that looks like a proper disaster. Nice. I think that gives us somehow way more clarity into what we should be doing in terms of the organization. Is there anything that we think we missed, or before we move on to the stuff people are probably watching for, which is Budgie stuff?
I think at the very least, this is a good start.
Okay.
Yeah. We can always come back to this at some
Yeah.
point if we think we forgot anything.
All right. Well, it is time to head on over to this. Budgie 10.x ideas/goals. What needs to happen for Budgie 10 to be considered properly complete? A majority of time investment goes to 11. Budgie 11 high-level objectives here. I filled out a few that are my personal wish list. And what needs to exist for Budgie 11 MVP? Because we have to keep in mind, like there's going to be tons of stuff that we would love for Budgie 11, but it doesn't. Not everything has to make it to 11.0. So we should just be realistic about what our goals are with that. So let's go ahead and start with Budgie 10.x because we really need to sort of present a clear set of goals and ideas for 10.x so the community understands here's what's on the roadmap for it still, and here's what we feel needs to happen before we could just like basically stop working on it aside from bug fixes, and the entire community's happy with it, and then move on to 11, you know, because like the way I see 11 in terms of its development happening is there's going to be a period of time where 10 and 11 are co-developed because we need to do bug fixes and minor tweaks for 10.x, and then when 11 is sort of MVP and we're happy with it as a replacement for 10, then we sort of shutter the 10.x development. So that's sort of the objectives there. But I have a couple to-dos here as well. The Budgie 11 one probably won't be used yet, but we'll see. So the current to-do here is new internal theme and demystify theme selection. But of course, we do have our issue tracker. So I would encourage the major items here, for example, like as an example, like Raven API being a potential to do. And we could discuss that with the 10.x ideas and goals and add and remove stuff. But there's that, and sort of evaluation of third-party widgets that should be merged in. So I'm going to go ahead and copy that over as well. Like so. I don't know why I copied it with the link. I don't want that. Let me just do Control Shift. Go. Okay. And I'm going to go ahead because I know these cards are going to get large. These down. Means I have to unlock all these. Okay. Oh, taking somebody's card with me. Okay. Yeah, I'm not going to lock it just in case. Right, so good. Yeah, simple task list. Nice. Yep. Chat says hello, hello. Lucy in chat says Ubuntu Budgie is pretty nice on my Raspberry Pi. Oh, actually, you know what? That is something I am going to add. I won't add it to the to-do here. Let me actually remove these. I'm going to add it to the ideas. That is, I'm so happy you mentioned that. Thank you. Oh, this was locked. This. Oh, please. Oh God, it's in all sorts of stuff up. Okay. So we want support for x86 or like we have already. If I could 64. I would like to do risk 5 and arm v back. Actually, do arm v question mark there. Just so I won't forget that. All right, so going back up to this to do for Budgie 10. So we have to do new internal theme, demystify theme selection. We have Raven API, which, you know, I would like to get in for 10 because I feel like that would provide a lot of longevity to 10 as we're like working on it. Individuals or stakeholders like Ubuntu Budgie are able to, you know, work on their own applets or Raven plugins, whatever we decide to call it. We have network indicator. Yep. Let's see. Do we want to merge screensaver into Budgie desktop for 410? Guess we could discuss that. We have Bluetooth applet / indicator. Okay, and then in progress, we have the current menu, which is blocking because of me. Otherwise, it's in really good shape. Evan Yeager, you've done an amazing job with that, by the way. New system tray, which I haven't had the opportunity to test out because I'm currently dog fooding. Actually, am I dog fooding it right now? Yeah, I'm dog fooding the Budgie menu stuff at the moment. And then
It's getting it to actually start working is a little bit of an ordeal, but once you've got it all set up, it actually I've been using it. I've been kind of dog fooding the current state of it for a few days, and it works pretty well.
Gotcha. So what do you mean by like it's an ordeal to get it set up?
Okay, so the main issue is that the specification does not like when you have the option to use both xembed and status notifier. Applications start up, the way that I've noticed it is applications will start up, they'll see if a status notifier host is available, and if it isn't, they'll fall back to xembed. And they won't go back to status notifier even if a host shows up. So if you start with an xembed tray, then adding a status notifier tray won't do anything unless you delete the xembed tray and then restart all the applications.
Okay.
Problem.
I don't think that's like too bad, to be honest. Like, because if we're thinking about it in the context of users transitioning, this is sort of something they need to opt into, and telling them, hey, you add it, you need to remove the old one, and you need to log out and log back in. Like, I don't think that's too big of a deal.
Yeah, and at least the other thing is that you need to restart the daemon at least once, because I had to put the watcher stuff, because there's a few different levels, and I had to put the watcher stuff in the daemon because putting the watcher in the panel meant that anytime you'd restart the panel or create a new panel, the watcher would restart, and then all the applications would get confused, and sometimes they'd stick in the new panel, sometimes they wouldn't. So you have to restart the session at least once after updating to a version with the new status notifier.
No, and this is something we'll touch on when it comes to Budgie 11 stuff, my opinion as well, like during at least this workshop, is all the things possible being in the daemon to avoid a lot of the issues you speak of, but also because we want to try to have that separation between the data and the actual presentation layer. So we have the new system tray in progress and the simple task list, which is going to cover non-grouping behavior. So for those that are like what in chat, like the reason why we're going to be doing that is the idea initially was to have the current icon task list handle, you know, grouping, and then non-grouping, which was added later on, and then it was supposed to handle labels and all that sort of stuff, so you could theoretically replace the WNCK based task list with icon task list and have all the goodies in that. However, it's a royal pain in the butt to do any work on icon task list with the non-grouping enabled, because it creates an entirely different layer of functionality and checks that we have to handle. And it gets to the point where we can't really do anything and iterate on icon task list without breaking one of 100 other things. So having it be separate at this point just kind of makes sense. So the owner of that task is Julian, and he has been working on it. And then under done, we have the refined internal theme, which Sarah has done. The separate notification manager, which Eben Yeager did. Evan, and then icon task list as well was done by Sarah, but the icon task list, icon scaling, and of course something that's also worth noting is massive changes to icon task list, grouping, abomination, logic, which was done by Julian. And what else was done? Budgie Control Center, yes, that was a huge one as well. That has been something that, like, I created the original fork and like made some changes and add some patches. Like Sarah did that, and then David, aka Foss Freedom, just like absolutely took off like a rocket with a bunch of changes there and has absolutely owned it. So I couldn't.
First thing I did was add mouse acceleration.
It was the one thing that you wanted. It was like that damn mouse acceleration.
Exactly.
Yep. Yeah, and for me, it was like, okay, I want to make sure that all the stuff that I used to have to patch in Solus all the freaking time, like the branding changes, I wouldn't have to worry about that anymore. And every consumer of Budgie, or every stakeholder of Budgie, from Fedora to Manjaro to Gecko Linux to Ubuntu Budgie to Solus, you're all able to just have your logo in the info section with the information about the operating system, rather than a frickin' GNOME foot there. So yeah. Okay. I think that's pretty good in terms of communicating the initial to-do, in progress, and done. I don't know how much we're going to be utilizing this 10.x ideas and goals, but I figured we could give it a go. If there's anything on your mind that hasn't been put into the issue tracker yet, I feel like it's worth having there. So I'll give you guys a few minutes to ponder. Thank you. I'm glad somebody said it. Nice. Okay.
Put that in bold.
Yes.
I couldn't read it. I'm sorry.
I'm gonna.
I discovered that Ubuntu had to develop a library on top of WNCK just to handle all the peculiar stuff that you had around LibreOffice and all that kind of stuff.
So what?
But it's still using, yeah.
What's the issue with WNCK? Because I haven't really worked with it that much, except for some
WNCK
window
is
tracking.
entirely X11 related.
That yeah. Okay. That makes sense.
So that's one issue, and the other issue is that it have issue to just track all the VM clays changes and all that kind of stuff. So most of the time it reports incorrectly.
Now I'm gonna do something a bit crazy here.
I mean,
yeah, it's an idea. It's not marked as gold.
it is an idea. It is an idea. And
it's not a bad idea. It might not be a good idea, but it is an idea.
It is an idea. And there are no bad ideas. Allegedly.
Allegedly.
So let's see.
So On says B11 was EFL based, so B11 will be EFL based, yes. And then the other question was, and what is Raven API? So Raven API is, if you think about the concepts of the Budgie panel applets, we have a plugin system leveraging a library called libps that allows you to develop widgets for it. So you would be able to with a Raven API, do the same thing. You'd be able to develop additional functionality that would tie directly into Raven, which was like, that was the end goal with Raven, was to have like this pluggable system where like application developers could write widgets that would tie into Budgie, or, you know, you could write individual widgets as well. So Win8Linux says, idea, integrated system for browsing, installing, updating, and removing themes and other customizations. I would say that's a good idea. I'm going to go ahead and put it in 10 for now. However, I think that might be better in scope for 11. And the reason why I think it might be better in scope for 11 is the amount of time investment we're going to have for that is like might end up being wasted due to the fact that we're going to be replacing all the themes anyways. But I'll go ahead and put that there. And I'm also going to go ahead alongside that and put a card here for idea. I don't know why it's massive text like that, but we can fix that in a moment. That is a chunker task, yes. Idea, and it'll be, this is font size here. Presets. Configuration presets. And also, I'm going to go ahead and, I mean, technically we could have this just as like a pool for general ideas, and we could figure out where to put them for if we want them in 10 or 11. But I'll put that here. And this is going to be slightly controversial. I'm going to copy paste this.
Well, I mean, the easiest way for better touch support.
No, don't say it.
To integrate libhandy into our software stack.
Oh,
I've also heard of this great new library called libadwaita.
Yeah, libadwaita, I think also, because that's officially from the GNOME devs. We could incorporate that too in our GTK4 conversion of Budgie to Budgie 11.
Just ignore the card. This is generally gnomification.
Yeah. Honestly, we could just let's just move that over there. We don't need that.
Yeah, we can hide that.
Or you know, it could just be hold on. Let me just add a card here, which is Budgie becomes UI on top of GNOME shell.
Yes, I completely agree with that. Let's do it. There
we go. Easy.
Win8Linux in chat says, in before Cervic kicked from Budgie. For his controversial ideas.
Lib input works as well at lower level. That's true. On says, how about an SDK / integrated design philosophy? So I'm not really sure what you mean by integrated design philosophy. However, when it comes to an SDK, I mean, I guess we sort of need to figure out what the scope of that would be, because ideally we would just have a plugin system that you'd be able to tie into. I'm not really sure if we necessarily need a full-fledged SDK for that, but that's something that could certainly be discussed. But all right, we have a lot of good ideas here and some other ideas that are ideas. So to more free desktop standards. Yes, I agree with that. All right, we have tons of great ideas here. So we could always add more, but let's go ahead and get started with actually discussing these and figure out whether or not we actually want these to be goals. And obviously we could shift them to the goals column if we agree on it. And then what we could do based on that is come up with sort of an action plan for implementing that down the road. We don't have to do it in this workshop. So the first idea, whoever, I don't know who has these colored cards. So whoever wrote Nuke WNCK, I think that was you, Evan Yeager, or maybe it was you, Julian. I
was
don't
me.
know.
I believe it was Julian.
I always
I
take orange.
Yeah,
I
I did
do.
this one. I'll change this color. This was mine. So do you wanna discuss nuking WNCK and leveraging? I mean, I added the leverage more mutter APIs because that's sort of the replacement.
Yeah, my idea was not that much to leverage more muter APIs because we want to get rid of that for Budgie 11. But instead go just lower on the stack and support both X11 as well as Wayland. And just connecting to that. I started prototyping that in Rust because I didn't want it to do C. But yeah, basically just have something that will have that run as a daemon and that we can just connect to Budgie in order to do all the application tracking stuff.
And what was the? Did you say ECWM? Is that what it's called?
Which one, sir?
Instead of using mutter APIs.
Oh,
basically-
just using X11.
Oh,
directly
X11.
and
Okay.
Wayland, yeah.
Sure. Yeah, so the reason why I had put leverage more mutter APIs is that sort of gets us in the mindset of this sort of being, I mean, for better or worse, we'd have to take a look at the Wayland protocols in the future, but at the moment with mutter, the tracking is done for applications at a mutter level. It presents you like GDK windows and they have their own sort of abstraction for Windows as well. And that is what sort of handles a lot of the tracking. I don't know exactly what the APIs are around that, but the idea also with WNCK is, well, in terms of deprecation of that would be to leverage these mutter APIs to do the tracking. That sort of gets us in the mindset of thinking of from a window manager perspective instead of an X11 perspective. And then by leveraging more of these mutter APIs, we're then able to theoretically support Wayland in the context of Budgie 10, which it's just an idea. I don't even know how feasible it is, given how tied in we are with X11. But I feel like if we were able to remove all things X11 in terms of the APIs, then it would be feasible.
So this is Sirbit opinion time. I think supporting Wayland in Budgie 10 would be nice, given that it would provide us some practice for Budgie 11, because we would be leveraging all the Wayland APIs for Budgie 11. The issue is we would need to figure out a compositor, because the whole, at least as I understand it, the benefit of X11 is that it handles a lot of that stuff for you, and then stuff like mutter is an abstraction on top of that. With Wayland, we would need to figure out essentially a replacement for that, on top of handling all of the changing all the X11 stuff for mutter stuff. I also don't know if that would necessarily be wasted effort, considering we're going to be throwing all of it out anyway.
Well, and then that, but
it would also, I just thought of this, it would also run, because one of the reasons we're doing Wayland for 11, and my understanding was we weren't doing it for 10, was because there's still a lot of stability issues on Wayland. And I don't know if people in chat are going to be mad at me for saying this, but there are issues with Wayland on stuff like NVIDIA cards and different hardware. And there's a lot of features that are supported with X11 that aren't supported with Wayland at the moment. Yeah. And that could change by the time that we have Budgie 11 up and running, but I don't think it would be wise to make that switch during the life cycle of Budgie 10 due to those various factors.
Yeah, so for Budgie 11, my mindset was to leverage, I think it's called Smithy, which is a Rust-based library. I know, Sarah, but you're not too happy with that, but when I think of it from the context of we need something super stable and has a lot of like lifetime and memory checks and that sort of stuff, Rust is sort of the way to go there. And obviously we could write other components in C or have flexibility there as well, whether or not we want to have like Rust APIs and that tie into C or using CBindGen to provide C APIs for Rust stuff. Who knows? However, if we're going to be using, say, Rust and Smithy to provide a framework for building our own window manager for 11, in theory, assuming no other complications, we could also apply that to Budgie 10 as well, because then it wouldn't be wasted effort because we would be using the same window manager, our new window manager. And then that could also enable us to incorporate a lot of items into 10, for example, multi-panel across multi-monitors and so on. I feel like this Wayland thing is a nice to have, but I feel like this, whether it's nuking X11 or nuking WNCK and replacing it with just using X11 APIs, or nuking WNCK and leveraging like window manager APIs, so we get in that mindset, and hopefully in theory make it so we could port over to like a Budgie 11 window manager more easily.
Yeah, I don't think that's a bad idea, because my main concern was that we would be duplicating effort. If we can extract that effort to a sort of independent project, then so long as we can support stuff like variable refresh rate, which I know a lot of distros are having issues with, or a lot of desktop environments are having issues with, then I would be fine with it. But the other thing would be stability. For the record, because I didn't make this clear, I do think that sort of moving our focus from X11 to a sort of window manager focused model is a very good thing. It's just the implementation of Wayland itself that I would have issue with. I guess because it would take some time to build up that window manager and get it into a state where we could incorporate it in Budgie 10, things could be better by then, and it would be more difficult to look into that at that point. Because we can develop them. We can develop Budgie 10 and a separate window manager in tandem, so long as I don't have to do any Rust programming.
Well, I think this. Well, I don't want to rope Julian on it, but this is something I'm personally interested in, and there's still there's a tons of lessons that I would have to learn for it, but that's something of course I'm willing to do, and I'm happy to make mistakes and learn from those. But this is something like we don't even have to, like, we could aim for using this window manager in 10, right? But that not be like the main goal. The main goal is 11, and if it happens to be in a state that it's good enough to serve Wayland users for 10.x, that we are able to do that, and have that be like an entirely separate project, which then sort of gets us into this idea of thinking, like, if that isn't a completely different repository, which I think it should be, then, you know, what sort of other like fragmentation and like, I guess refactoring do we need to do to make sure that, say, we could have an X11 window manager for like Budgie 10.x for those that want to use that, and then also a Wayland one, and make sure that the same APIs and daemons and sort of like both of those are able to tie into both of the window managers. I hope some of that made sense.
Oh yeah. I can agree with that. I think ultimately I think Wayland should not be a certainty, but it should be something that we should keep in mind, because we're going to be using it in the future. Yeah. And I think that if we do get to the point where we have a window manager that could be incorporated in a Budgie 10, then it's something worth considering.
Let's see. So instead of
yeah, sorry. I was just wondering if getting rid of this W and CK stuff, we shouldn't instead develop just a library that does kind of the same thing as W and CK and could be used by other without tying that directly to the compositor or window manager.
Yeah, I'm not really sure what that would look like from the Wayland model, but that's a good idea of just having a generic application tracking library.
So far, I only started on the X11 part because that's what I knew. I did a kind of Windows manager using that in Golang, but yeah, I was interested in exploring how it was for Wayland, and now that I am on Fedora, maybe I can do better than what I have.
It's actually, it's a really good one. It's like, looks like Cerebit is doing some organizing there. So would we all, let's leverage these like little bubble things here on the right hand side and actually use them for like grab one, don't copy it, but actually physically like move it. If you approve of this particular thing, go ahead, move it over. If you don't have to. I just want to like sort of see if there's a consensus on this, and then what we'll do is have arrow that goes. I'm trying to. There we go.
Nope. Yeah. You go ahead.
There we go. Okay, so we all agree WNCK should be nuked. Surprise, surprise! But I'm glad we've developed that consensus. So I would say that we can move that into goals, right?
Let me delete that arrow, I guess.
No, let's keep it for now.
Yeah, I'll keep it. I'll keep it.
So when it comes to the application tracking library and API, so Cerebit, I know that you are not a fan of Rust. And I guess what we need to figure out as we move forward is where do all these different languages make the most sense for us? Like where does C make sense? Where does Rust make sense? Where do we want to leverage one over the other? I feel like that's a conversation that's worth having because obviously we want to try to maximize the amount of people that are involved, but we should also take a look at it from the perspective of the strengths and weaknesses of both. You know, what's the strength of C? What's the strength of Rust? And what's the weaknesses of so I feel like this is a conversation.
I will make my opinion on Rust clear. I have not used it enough to be able to form a concrete opinion over what it's good for and whether or not I like it. I have used C to the extent that I understand what it's good for, and I do like C. I think my personal opinion would be that I wouldn't want to mix languages in one project in order to minimize complexity of building and packaging. But I think that Rust has benefits that we could leverage in some components if they need to be lower level, like a window manager. I guess the issue then would be the amount of people on the team that know Rust and are willing to learn it versus the amount of people on the team who know C or are willing to learn it. And I think more of us are more familiar with C than they are with Rust.
Yeah, and that's a good question, but it's also worth try not to like trap ourselves into. For example, when we went from, I don't remember if it was Budgie 8 where we went to Vala, or if it was 10 where we moved to Vala and suffered since then. But there was a decision that IKEA had made at one point about moving from entirely being C, being sort of C, but mostly Vala, because there is like this whole mindset and like promise by individuals that if it was written in this one given language, which was higher level, that more people would be able to get involved. And at least in my personal opinion, my observation, that isn't something that actually ended up happening. So I feel like, yes, I agree we should make sure that we choose languages that are approachable and that at least the current team at the very least is comfortable with using or willing to use. But let's try to also not to avoid the trap of like supporting languages just for the hope that somebody might use it.
So, yeah, I agree with that.
I don't know. Okay,
that's fine.
All right. So everybody agrees that there should be some form of an application library or application tracking library in an API. So one of the benefits of doing this, as an example, in Rust is we could use something like cbindgen, at least my understanding, to generate C APIs that could then be used, for example, in the Budgie 10 window manager, as well as well, I guess theoretically we'd probably be able to do maybe a C API and then leverage Vala. Like, I feel like there is also other projects we could take a look at, like librSVG, that provide VAPI support.
We can take a look at the backend, the installer backend that System66 developed, because they did that. The backend is in Rust, but Elementary have a front end that is in Vala, so they are doing exactly that.
Yeah, that's definitely something that we could take a look at, because then that would provide us the safety and sort of some of the benefits there with Rust, but then allow us to then use it in other languages. And I know like some people would make the fair argument that maybe these sorts of bindings aren't the best thing to use, and you should use like the same programming language, like say C for C and Rust for Rust. But we don't really live in that world. We kind of live in a world where everything's written in all other languages, and we just kind of have to deal with it, choose the best tool for the job, and hope the bindings are okay. So, but for this, Julian, you said you were writing this in Rust. Is that right?
Yeah, but I only did that in Rust because I wanted some more velocity as well as just having a look at the language. Yeah, it turns out I didn't like that too much, Rust.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, it's usable. Be it C or Rust, it's the same for me.
Okay.
Except that
So-
Rust is a lot more verbose.
Yeah, I mean, I think some of the benefits of Rust, and we could have a long discussion about this, and we don't have to make a decision on this in particular at this moment in time, but Rust has a broader standard library that can be leveraged. It's also cross-platform and supports more architectures. And of course, they have an easier to access ecosystem through stuff like Cargo. For better or worse, mind you. That model isn't flawless, as we all know from the NPM world. But they do at least have that ecosystem there. But we don't have to make that decision. But it feels like everybody agrees that we should nuke WNCK and at least develop an application tracking library to sort of abstract away that, and then that could theoretically go into Wayland. But I feel like that could be just an idea and not necessarily a goal when it comes to Wayland. Thanks. So the next we have EFL and Qt theme handling. So Sarah, I believe that was yours. If you want to cover that.
Yeah. So at least I will say I have very little understanding of how Qt and EFL themes work. I know that Qt sort of leverages GTK2 theming to an extent for its applications if you try to theme them, but I kind of want to see Budgie move, because we're moving to EFL. I want to see Budgie move away from sort of treating GTK as the first class citizen with regards to theming support and just making the desktop look good. I'd rather users be able to do what they can do with like KDE, for example, where they can set GTK and Qt themes independently of each other. So I mean, icon themes is already kind of handled, but that's what I'd like to see, at least for the widget themes, for us to kind of move away from the GTK centric model and support other toolkit themes.
Yeah, that's a good idea. At least providing the ability to have some sort of selection model for those would be good. And of course, that could tie into quite easily any sort of supplemental software that we want to develop independently, or in the case of like Control Center in EFL, and making sure that sort of out of the box immediately that looks decent, if not good, and on par with our GDK offering. So I would say I'm personally happy with that. I feel like we could probably make this more concrete in terms of the information when it comes to handling. Like, are we talking about, like selection?
Selection was my idea. Like right now in Budgie desktop settings, we just have, actually, let me open it so I have a reference for this. We just have a selector that says widgets with set the appearance of window decorations and controls. And it's not clear to the user that the only applications that are themed by that are GTK ones. So I think it would be wise to have, GTK widgets, Qt widgets, EFL widgets, or maybe like a better UI for that than the one that I just came up with. But that would be my idea, would just be providing that to the user.
So when it says there's a Q style that could use GTK2 plus themes, Q alone just can't use GTK2 though. Well, there's also platform styles. So there is a Q platform style that supports GTK. I want to say it supports GTK3. Which is funny, like, because we have that out of the box. Well, I should say when I was using Souls, we had that out of the box. and it actually made like my Q apps actually look halfway decent. But that isn't something that is supported by default, at least out of the box with like Endeavor OS or anything of that sort. You have to set all that stuff up yourself. So having some support for that and maybe a pipeline for enabling that functionality would be nice. But I would say this is probably part of like a broader just control center Budgie desktop settings thing. So I would say we could probably move this over to goals, right? Does everybody agree that we should?
Yeah, I think we're all in agreement on that.
Okay. All right.
That's
well,
something that I've been thinking about for a while, and I'm glad that everyone's kind of on board with it.
better accessibility, keyboard, tab order, keyboard shortcuts. I mean, do we even need to have a discussion on this? Because I feel like everybody knows that we need to improve keyboard shortcuts. We also need to try to do better at like decoupling ourselves from the ones that GNOME session and GNOME settings daemon, all that they provide, because there ends up being so much like overlap and conflict. And there ends up being scenarios where they'll be exposing GNOME shell shortcuts that don't obviously translate over to Budgie at all. So, but in terms of better accessibility, so maybe what we could do is we have this card here. If there are particular items that you feel need improvement, that you write them down here. So I'm going to go ahead and start with Budgie menu, which I know, Evan, you've done additional work, I believe, in 11 in the rewrite of Budgie menu. Is that right?
Ooh, how do you mean?
For like keyboard tab, like ordering and that sort of stuff. Check it, double check. Yeah, because I could press tab now as an example, and it actually goes through the items.
Oh wait, that wasn't a thing before?
Well, it was, but it doesn't work quite correctly. I was the one who stepped in into Evan's work on Budgie menu and tried to improve the tab order a little bit.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
With the old Budgie menu, you could tab select both the buttons inside the rows and also the rows, so you had to hit tab twice to get to any individual.
Oh, okay.
I didn't actually know that.
Yeah,
Right,
so I fixed that.
this is already solved, so that's good. With the rewrite.
At least with Budgie menu, it's solved for the most part. Although this is something that I brought up a couple times in the Matrix, but I do want to see a keyboard shortcut to open the power menu.
Yes. I know that's something you want. So basically, that would open the power menu that's within Budgie menu, right?
Within Budgie menu, yeah. So so
we would basically need to have like a keyboard shortcut that would invoke a shortcut that would open the primary menu, that open the primary panel's Budgie menu, and then immediately open up or invoke the power menu.
Correct.
Yeah,
I wasn't sure at all how that would work.
Yeah,
it have to be like a debus thing between
Couldn't we just have like a kind of a power overlay the same way we have, for example, for the command prompt, have something like that where you just have the power control? I think it makes more sense than to open the menu, then open a submenu and have those buttons.
That does make some sense, yeah. Kind of like how we have the run dialog open. Just have a power dialog instead.
Yeah, could do that. Do we feel that might get a little confusing though? And actually, then that really leads us to a story of like when it comes to, oh God, and Evan's gonna murder us for this, but if you hit the power button, then should that not just invoke the same sort of power dialog that would then show up in the center of your screen with options, the same one that would be invoked by the keyboard shortcut, or?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
I disagree on that, actually. I think that having the
so you
button...
think we should have two things?
It would be...
In addition to the third thing, which is the user indicator.
It would... I'm conflicted because it would be more accessible to have one menu open with a keyboard shortcut that you could then tab through, because at least with the Budgie menu, if you have to tab to the button to open it, and then you need to tab into the options and then tab through the options. But like you could make the same argument for the run dialog. As soon as we get the application tracking stuff or like the fuzzy search and stuff into that, it's basically just the Budgie menu. As far as I'm aware. So we have that in 2 places. I don't see why we couldn't have power stuff in 2 places.
I think we can reduce duplication by just having a Budgie menu invoke this pop-up, this power pop-up. Like you have the power button in Budgie menu. When you click, it opens the power pop-up, and same for the power indicator that we have at the moment. I think it's named like user indicator.
Yeah.
Instead
Also,
of just having
if you
multiple stuff
clicked on
everywhere.
the power button there, it would show that pop up.
Yeah, that's right. Just centralize everything to that.
Is that something people agree on with the UX? I don't.
Something in the back of my brain is saying that it doesn't want to click on the power button and then have a menu open in the middle of the screen.
Yeah.
I don't know why, but there's something in there.
Is there anything that's really stopping us from? Oh God, and Evan, don't murder me. But I was also thinking about this from the concept of how do I want the UX for the XDG menu thing to show up? You know, where you have options to like select your documents, your pictures, or videos, or any of that when you click like Joshua as an example down the left-hand corner of like Budgie menu. Or do I want that to slide out from the left, or do I want that to pop up within the Budgie menu, like take up the entire overlay? Like,
I would almost think that would be its own separate view, since I don't think it's currently a stack, but it would have to be a stack anyway if we do grid view.
Yeah.
That you would then just switch to when hitting the button.
What are people's thoughts there? Because then what we could do is we could have the power button either do that, where it has like its own stack with the widgets, or it would show the overlay on top, in which case we could use sort of the same GTK widget. Like we could have 2 different components that are leveraging like our own class as an example. So the pop-up in the center would just be like that same component, but with wrapped in a GTK window or something in the middle of your screen. You know what I'm saying?
Sorta, kind of.
Okay, so if I click on the Budgie menu as like with the rewrite, I click on the power. We have like all these different elements for lock and log out and suspend and hibernate, restart, so on and so forth. So what I would be proposing is like this would be, say, within its own stack, like sort of all these components, but this component itself that lists all these elements, this would be like a Budgie power menu component. And this component is something that we could reuse across both this pop-up that would be in the center of your screen, as well as within Budgie menu. So that way we're not duplicating code, is what I'm getting at.
That doesn't sound like a bad idea. I guess we could also, because I just realized this is a debate between the way Windows 10 does it and the way that like Windows XP did it with the power menu. I think if we wanted to change the style of how it's presented, then we could just add properties that you could change, or like methods that you could throw at it to like change the mode where it's like center screen or within Budgie menu, where like for Budgie menu, you'd have a vertical stack list with labels next to the icons, and then for the center of the screen, it would switch to horizontal with all the labels below the icons, sort of more like what Evan was originally doing with the power menu when he started prototyping it. So I think that's a decent way to go if we wanted to do both.
Yeah. But that's completely getting sidetracked, but maybe we need to have an item, Sarah, but if you want to, for like refactoring that, and then being able to actually just have the user indicator that would invoke the power menu in the center of the screen. I think that would make the most sense.
The other thing then would be, where does that code live? Because then it wouldn't be just a part of the Budgie menu, right?
No, we would just have, I guess, something similar to the run dialog.
Oh,
where
that's right.
it-
Yeah, that's all handled in like
where it's like
LSD
a
and
yeah. The problem with the
daemon
run
anyway.
dialog is when we invoke it, it creates a brand new window that then gets destroyed after you're done using it. So then when you go to do it again, it has to like regenerate itself all over again, which is like not ideal. So ideally that should be something that always lives just somewhere in the background so it's instantaneously able to be invoked. Which I feel like I have a task here for that, for Budgie run dialog. Maybe run dialog. Maybe it's in the Budgie menu one. Yeah, maybe not.
I don't think there's a task for
No.
it.
Let me go ahead and
Plugin.
write it here.
When it said something about plugin based integrated search, I mean, with the new Budgie menu, we're kind of already extracting the search and the application tracking to a separate component, right?
Yeah, that's
I
the
don't know,
idea.
something-
And
Sorry, I was just thinking that maybe means something like, what is it called? The slingshot menu that it has different plugins they could switch between for search. I wonder if it maybe means something like that.
right. I'm not sure that would be in scope for 10.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would definitely table that for 11 though, because that sounds like an interesting concept.
And we'll go ahead and add a card here for 11. Or extensible. Because this also ties into other ideas I have for Budgie menu that I'll write cards for. Extensible Budgie menu. And then we're going to have alternative UXs for menu. BG full screen dash for GNOME shell replacement. Yeah, without getting too much in the weeds yet for 11. So we have better accessibility. So we have, yeah, that ties into better gestures and touch support. And now that I actually have a work laptop that has a touchscreen, I could sort of work on that. But also the idea of having like multi-finger swipe gestures, leveraging like lib input. So I feel like probably lib input would be ideal, because some of the issues like with touch support are sort of like GDK3 issues that are better with the new event controllers and improved event controllers in 4, but we're not going to be worrying about that because we're not going to GDK4. But in terms of other keyboard shortcuts and accessibility, so Cerebit, you had mentioned invoke, power, which, oh, you actually already have this. So I'm actually going to put this over here. Was there any other issues with accessibility in terms of the keyboard actions that are worth having? Because obviously like high contrast and all that is something that should be improved, but I feel like that might be a better task for 11. Rather than investing a bunch of time in creating a high contrast GDK theme or trying to work with the GNOME developers on having high contrast support Budgie, which is not going to happen.
Yeah, that's not happening. I mean, mostly what I was thinking was I want Budgie to be mostly usable with just a keyboard, because that is absolutely not the case right now.
You know, this is something that there's a task for.
Oh, the primary. Yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, what was
I wrote up some of our ideas for the budget menu rewrite and matrix for later.
Very nice. Thank you very much.
Yep.
Maybe a little controversial.
No, actually, expose mode is something that I want. I just didn't know if you would want it in 10 or 11. My goal at least was have it in 11 so we could have it as like, here, if you hate GNOME Shell, here's this preset in Budgie 11 that you could enable, and suddenly you have a GNOME Shell-like experience. So,
Well, the nice thing, at least with Mac OS, one of the very few things that I still appreciate about Mac OS is that there was a dedicated button for it. So even if you didn't want to use it as like a main feature, you could still hit the button and see all the windows at once. Which I think we could leverage if we wanted to add just like a keyboard shortcut like we have for run dialog. We could just have one that opens the overview. Or, you know, we could make it a sensitive thing like with a GNOME configuration style. With 11, obviously.
this is one that I don't know if this really makes sense from the perspective of 10 or 11, but because we're going to have to get rid of WNCK, and that is sort of what provides us at least some of the underlying functionality. And actually, Evan, I think, was it you or was it Cyber that actually, or aka Stefan Rick, that was the one that worked on the WNCK workspace stuff?
That was definitely not me.
Right. So it was
in the past.
Cyber
In the past, I was way too scared to touch internals like that.
Fair enough. Because, you know, there's like a very simple workspace switcher that we have. And really what I would want is like sort of this, my vision for it is kind of like a Windows 10-esque thing. But it could also be something that's like GNOME Shell-esque where, you know, they're side by side and you could drag them and fade between the workspaces. But just in general, a workspace manager that doesn't suck would be good. So,
Win8 Linux in chats has an idea for grouping windows together and managing them as if they're a single window. Not entirely sure what that.
Yeah, I don't know either, because when you think about it from the context of, we're kind of already doing that with icon task list, where things are grouped under, like, all the things related to Vivaldi are grouped under Vivaldi, all the things for Firefox are under Firefox, and so on.
Oh, wait, he said it's an i3 and Sway. Maybe he means something like window tiling, but only for a specific application. Like you could tile, say, if you have 4 terminal windows, you could tile those 4 and then scale them as if they were a single window.
Oh, maybe.
That might be something for the advanced tiling capabilities in 11. That could be an
Yeah, that sounds like an 11 thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think these are all really good ideas here in terms of the accessibility, and it gives us a good idea of how we want to do things in 11 as well, in terms of the functionality for icon task list and accessibility and so on, is to have these cards as maybe goals for improvements on 10, because they're not massive things exactly either. Especially as we simplify icon task list and clean up the code there, it might be even easier, one would hope. So
yeah, but I think it's still pretty far. This one is still pretty far because we have a lot of stuff to clean up in the icon task list.
yeah. But do we think it should be goals for 10, or do we think that these should be 11 goals excluding this power dialogue one, which would probably be 10?
I think some of it could fit into 10. Like, just keyboard tab order would be pretty reasonable, I think. Well, my only concern with that would be how you would be able to tab through the panel. Because you can't.
I don't know. Because then when we start getting into stuff like, okay, how do you decide which panel you want to tab into? 'Cause
Yeah,
what if you have
that's-
multiple panels?
I guess just better tab order for applets, I guess. Like if you click on an applet, you should be able to tab through it pretty reasonably without running into any strange things like for example, I'm in the power indicator and you can tab on the separator for some reason.
Right. Yeah.
So just cleaning that stuff up.
Let's do up ability. Sort of stuff. Better gestures. I mean, I think in light of the fact that most modern laptops have really good touchpads with multi-gesture support, I feel like that's sort of a no-brainer for at the very least 11. I'm not really sure what we could do in terms of gesture support for 10. Because like if I think of like a 3-finger swipe up or something, that would invoke a new workspace manager that wouldn't exist in 10 probably. But
I guess we could like look into basic gestures like zooming and moving stuff around. Maybe nothing like too complicated, but just simple gesture. Would we have to leverage libwacom for tablet discovery, or does the GNOME software we leverage already do that? Because like tablets that I use work pretty well already.
I don't know about tablets. I was thinking like touchpads, which libinput would handle. I'm not sure there when it comes to libwacom.
As far as I can tell, the updates for libwacom do include support for touchscreens specifically. If it's input mapping from touchscreens to Windows, then it would work for tablets and for touchscreens.
Yeah.
It seems like the FFmpeg thing where it ballooned from just being fast forwarding MPEGs to being a video manager for basically everything you can think of.
I'm gonna go ahead and move, at the very least, I'm gonna drop this connection. It's over. So, okay. So if we think about it from the context of, all right, let's move on to the next one. So let's go with like a macOS GNOME style window overview. We could do a / expose. I feel like this is definitely one that should be a goal for 11. Not just an idea for 11, but an actual goal that we have that we could leverage, because it's also this might be controversial, but for me, I actually really like GNOME Shell and macOS's expose mode and prefer that over Alt Tab. I actually find it to be more efficient, but I also might be just very weird in that regard. I'm not proposing that we get rid of Alt Tab. I'm just saying I actually personally prefer expose.
I like both. I think both is good.
Alt Tab is really all I know, so that's up to you.
Okay. Well, I would like this to at least be a goal for at some point in 11.
I would say that being able to like view all the windows on the screen at once would make it much easier, because I usually have multiple browser windows open. So if that would make finding which one I want at any given time easier, then I think that would be really nice.
I'm not sure the technical feasibility of having it 10 though. That's why I went ahead and moved it to 11, just to play it safe.
I'm fine with keeping it to 11, but I do want to do it eventually.
Really good workspace manager. I don't know, because like this, the way I'm thinking about it as well is like from the context of this could technically be just a separate window without borders that we like slide up from the bottom of the screen, sort of thing, like from behind the panel. Like it doesn't need to be part of the panel itself. So theoretically, this is something that could be done as a completely separate thing. If we want to go the panel route, I guess we have to kind of agree on how we would want workspace management to work in 11. So I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on this.
I don't use workspaces. I used workspaces a lot on Mac OS, but I don't use them at all now that I have multiple monitors. So I'll defer to you guys.
I've tried to use workspaces before, and I just always abandon it.
I use 3 workspace on a daily basis, but I'm always using keyboard shortcuts to move windows across my workspace. I never use be it on Windows or Linux. I never use the graphical interface for that.
Yeah.
I will say that there are a significant chunk of users, at least on the Solus forums, that make heavy use of workspaces.
Yeah.
As to exactly how they do it is, I'm not as sure of.
That could be the subject of a survey or poll. Then
This is
if
true.
we wanted
Yeah.
to
That sounds
get
like a really good
some
idea.
because if there are a ton of people that use workspaces and there's not a lot of people on the team that do, then it could be worth seeing what the community thinks of how they would like to see workspaces evolve in Budgie 10.
I think for me, I would say the reason why I don't use workspaces as much is, one, I have multiple monitors, but when I don't have multiple monitors, like I'm on my work laptop and I'm not immediately plugged in, I think the fact that it's a manual process for ordering stuff is probably what turns me off the most from it. But if we had a similar system to what we have for like advanced tiling, where I could just automatically have a window that's always on a given workspace, like that would probably encourage me to use workspaces more. But I think a survey for this would be good, but maybe we could put this into ideas for 11 instead of goals.
I will say that
I think specifically drag windows into new workspaces like you can in Mac OS, I think that would help, like, give me more incentive to use workspaces in theory, because they're a little more clunky to set up at the moment.
Yeah, that's putting it politely.
I think there has been a question raised before on the forums about automatic sorting into an app automatically going to a particular workspace. So that sounds like something worth exploring.
Yeah. So we have a set primary icon task list because you could have something where you could have a dock that's an icon task list, and then I don't know, one that's in another panel or something. Who knows? People are weird. But we would still need to figure out what the favorited application is, because those are per icon task list, at least in the context of Budgie 10. If this is something we would want for 10 or wait for 11 to have keyboard shortcuts, have that as part of the user story of keyboard shortcuts and improvements to that. So you'd be able to do something like pressing Super 1, and then that would launch the first application that you have. Or if it's already launched, it would basically be emulating the left click, so it could like then bring it to the foreground or hide it and so on.
I'm just wondering if I'm just wondering if it should be up to icon task list to do that. Why not just create another applet where you can only have a single instance of this applet and that handle just that? You have up to 10 favorites, and then you can just switch. This way, it's more easy to handle than to add another layer of mess in the icon task list.
Yeah. Well, I think the idea behind why a lot of people were thinking it'd be in the icon task list and was like, if you look at it from the perspective like Unity and all that, most people would have pre-pinned applications or applications they just launched but might want to continue to invoke from the keyboard. Like if the problem with not having it be connected to the icon task list, but having it be something where it's a dedicated applet that you have to configure ahead of time at the very least, is that it bases the assumption that the workflow would be you already know what your fourth app is going to be, because you've already dedicated the fourth slot to, like, say, element.
I'm just not sure how people will use that. In fact, like, will they have maybe like I'm a developer, so I constantly have my web browser open. I constantly have my IDE open. So I would use that maybe on one, I would set up Firefox. On two, I would set up VS Code, that kind of stuff. So I always know which kind of app I want to open. That would be how I use it.
So maybe you could even have it, I guess, to have a pairing of the best of both worlds, where you could have this concept of like you pinning your favorites, but it's not related to icon task list, but you're defining ahead of time, you know, like slots 1 through 4 are going to be these apps that I always use. If they don't exist, then, you know, they get invoked. And if they do exist, then we maximize or unmaximize them as we need. And then you could have like, say, 5 through 10 if you want to be dynamic. And then that means anything that isn't within one of those, whatever was the first thing that launched would be that. Just an idea. I feel like maybe this actually requires a lot more thinking and surveying. So maybe it's something that's better suited for 11. I don't know.
Yeah, I think we could afford that in 10 if we have some spare time, but definitely not a priority. Because we need a lot of surveying to know all the users will want to use that.
Yeah. Well, let's go ahead and keep it in ideas then for now. Better gestures, I feel like, is an idea, but we don't really know what to do there yet. So I feel like that also, it's actually a box with.
Yeah, I know what to add for that. Just being able to switch workspace using the touchpad, like elementary of it. But the way they did that is not using lib input. They use an external library for that.
Something like this, and then. Oh, this is that, and then the move it behind. Something like this, maybe. Okay. Budgie run dialog should not be destroyed and recreated. Have it live in background. I feel like this is something that could, in theory, be trivial or not that complicated to have, because basically it requires us just not to destroy it and then make sure the window is hidden instead of destroyed when it's not in use. And using stuff like skip task list and all that, we could hide it from task list and alt tab and that sort of stuff. I feel like this is something we could have for 10.
I see no reason why not to do it in 10. Yeah, it seems easy enough.
And with the run dialog, to get that to use the new app indexer is going to take a significant rework as it is. So I would just tack that on to just, in general, redoing Budgie run dialog.
Yeah. Just do redo. Ah, where'd it go?
And it's gone forever.
No! What did you do?
No more run dialog.
It was being moved while I was working on it, so it just disappeared. Redo.
We're deleting the run dialog. We're getting rid of it.
Okay. Let's go through all this without thinking about this one yet. Better DPI scaling support. I feel like, how feasible realistically is this in 10, given GDK3 support for, or I should say lack of support for fractional scaling? Because EFL supports fractional scaling, but GDK3 does not.
Well, at the moment, one of the issues with the XEmbed system tray, because I'm the tray guy now, is that it doesn't support scaling in any reasonable way because you're relying on the applications to scale the window themselves. And I tried it, and it doesn't work very well because most of them just ignore the fact that the size is larger. With Status Notifier, it would be easier to do so because we then have control over how big the image is and how big the panel is. I think in general, what I intended with this card was just making it so that Budgie at 2x scaling looks as good as Budgie at 1x scaling. Like we handle even not just fractional scaling, but just scaling to whole numbers appropriately where everything is sized correctly and it doesn't look weird if you scale it up.
Which it can. And this has actually been a pain point for me. I don't face it enough. I don't face it on my desktop, but with my laptop, it took tons of work across several work days to actually get it to the point where the resolution on the monitor I was hooking up was configured to enough of a resolution where it would look fine at 1.x DPI, but not mess up the scaling of windows on my laptop, which was a different resolution on its display. It's just a complete mess. So that wouldn't necessarily be solved, but making it so Budgie is more responsive to DPI differences would be ideal. I don't know how much of that is feasible in 10, but if that's something you want to do or you want to try tackling, you're welcome to do that. I just don't know if that's something I'm personally am willing to invest the time and energy into for 10. So up to you on that one, I would say.
We could keep it in ideas because I think it is worth looking, like if when we're rewriting applets like I'm doing with Status Notifier, it's worth looking at and just making sure that we cover that use case. But I don't think it's necessary to go back into everything we've ever written and go like, does this support high DPI? Does this support high DPI?
Yeah. So here's another one: integrated system for browsing, installing, updating, and removing themes and other customizations. This is one that came from chat. So personally, I think this is a nice idea, but unless we are the individuals that are hosting these themes, as opposed and like providing a pipeline for these developers of themes and icon themes and so on, to be able to directly provide it to users and have an update mechanism around that that's completely separate from the package management. I don't know how feasible this is. Because otherwise, you're going to run into a situation where it's like, okay, well, does that mean we have to explicitly support every single operating system and their package managers and make sure we keep the package name support? Like, I'm not sure how feasible that is, but I'd like to hear people's...
That sounds like something that would be its own separate program to me, and not something directly in Budgie itself.
Yeah.
Because again, like you said, you have to handle providers, whether you're hosting it yourself or you're getting it from, I don't know, what are they, Plank, GNOME Look, any of those places, however KDE does it.
Yeah.
And I think that would have to be its own separate application for someone if they wanted to explore that.
Mm-hmm. The idea of having to deal with multiple different operating systems and how they handle package repositories and how they handle themes scares me. And also the fact that in a lot of, if we want, because installing themes on Linux is kind of broken because you're basically beholden to what you can build on your own or what's in the repositories.
Yeah.
But I don't know if we're the ones to solve that.
And not to mention that it's getting further complicated thanks to changes like libadwaita, where the new recommendation, instead of changing a single setting in G settings, is to then have to copy over CSS files and assets into a given .config directory in order to handle all that yourself, which is, it's an interesting way of going about it. I would say it's not the way I would choose to go about it, but we would have to handle use cases like that as well. So I'm not really sure if we're the best ones to do this. But it's an idea.
What I would like to see is sort of a ecosystem-wide effort in order to improve theming, installation, and support. But I wouldn't want to be the ones to spearhead it.
I would too. Unfortunately, I feel like if there was going to be an effort regarding that, it would likely be between us, KDE, and probably like Mate, basically everybody but GNOME.
Yeah.
Because they already chose the direction that they want to go. So, but let's go ahead. I'm not going to scrap this, but we could just keep it in ideas.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't hurt. Next one, I would say this is a big one. Own greeter. Whoever wrote this, feel free to describe.
Yeah, so I have two ideas for that actually. Like, first one is that the greeter that we currently use cannot be shipped by Debian, and it has proven to be an issue because Ubuntu Budgie have a different experience on that because they ship something different. And the second one was that we are planning to go EFL for Budgie 11. Yet we don't have experience on that, like what are the shortcomings and all that kind of stuff. And I feel like the greeters is kind of a separate piece of software that we could just use to experiment on that. And it's pretty easy to develop a greeter actually. So just doing that in EFL and converting that in GTK later if we need isn't that hard to do.
So wait, by greeter, do you mean like?
Do you mean the lock screen, or do you mean the login greeter? Because my understanding is Debian that Debian does ship LightDM and SlickReader, whereas they just don't ship Budgie screensaver because of its.
Oh yeah, the screensaver. Sorry, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I forgot that it was a bit of a mess in Linux. So.
Yeah. I
should probably move this from the board over down here. So do that. Because
in this particular one, I feel like the login greeter and the screen locker should more or less be the same thing. And I don't know about in the context of 10, but at least my thinking with 11 is that this would at least be closer to the GNOME shell and Mutter model, where it's more closely tied to the window manager, because as people know, with like using, say, the lock screen and multi-monitors and the way things are coupled right now is the fact that there are certain methods you could invoke that would end up killing the screensaver and allow you to basically bypass. At least that's my understanding. I haven't really delved too much into it. There's a security model issue around that.
Yeah, the whole screensaver greeter situation is a bit of a mess in Linux. Like, where is the separation? Or what should it handle? And all that kind of stuff. For me, it should just communicate with libpam and just do that. Like, you are authenticated, you are not authenticated. But the reality is that it's doing a lot more than that.
Yeah. Somebody had mentioned a placeholder can be the LightDM WebKit reader. I know Integros used it in the past. So I'm kind of against the idea of using something heavy-handed like WebKit as part of the greeter. I mean, we're talking about entire web engines when really just a simple UI for login and log out and switch user would be more appropriate. And I don't think there's really been any large complaints about our current use of LightDM and SlickReader, but it would be nice to have something that's our own down the road. That's fair. WebKit is an extreme solution. So Commissioner Tadpole stated, let's see. Also, sorry I came in late for the last topic, but how does Budgie handle Qt apps? I know Cinnamon and XFCE use something that makes Qt follow the GDK2 theme, while GNOME does not have anything of the sort and just forces it away to light on. So we don't do any particular handling in that regard. This is actually something we have over here in the ideas is EFL and Qt theme selection or handling and selection. There are already existing mechanisms like Qt style platform that we could theoretically leverage to improve the cross toolkit support. And this is something we need to think about anyways as we go into 11, is making sure that all these different applications look and feel as cohesive as possible. So this is something that's in target for 10. So yeah. But in terms of the own screensaver, I think this is a good effort, and I feel like this is something that would span both 10 and 11 in a way, as both goals and ideas. So maybe that's an effort that's worth pursuing for both, because, you know, if we have a working screensaver in like EFL as an example, then there's no reason why we couldn't, in theory, like tie that in more closely into the window manager or whatever security model we have for 11. So maybe we could move this between the two. That probably not the best way of doing it. So the next one is I had an idea. So panel and configuration presets. So funnily enough, Ubuntu Budgie already has this in their welcome app, but I feel like this is something that's really needed for Budgie 11. I almost said Windows 11. God. So for Budgie 11, I would like presets to exist where you could select like GNOME Shell. You could choose like GNOME 2.x, and it would provide you the simple task list and that sort of thing. And like a quote unquote normal, which would choose the default Budgie, and like a Mac OS one. And like this wouldn't go just beyond the panel. This would go into configuration of Budgie as a whole. I feel like maybe this is better, like if we look at these two cards with like using TOML instead of G settings, or a better format, basically anything that isn't G settings for NTComp for 11 would be ideal. And your remarks on
I
that?
would put that on both of those things. I would put on 11. Trying to migrate from G settings to TOML would be a massive pain.
Yeah, I guess if we're having to break configuration for 10 already, for 10 to 11, then
Migrating entirely from G setting to own configuration layer is a bit too complex, but maybe just having more control, like for example, you can export your panel configuration, that kind of stuff. Maybe it's something that we could pursue in the 10.
Well, yeah, that's a good idea. And how convenient that I had implemented something called libdconf in Golang to dump decomp stuff of the current user. And that actually is capable of doing it to TOML. So, and it provides a loading mechanism. So we could possibly have that, maybe panel export. Actually,
that's something that I've seen brought up in other circles, is the desire to be able to export panel configurations to a format that you can then.
Yeah, we'll do this in 10. Just the idea being not just I would say not just the window manager, but kind of like not just the panel, but kind of everything that's related to Budgie, like your current GTK theme. You'd be able to select that to export, or you could choose to export that, and then, you know, like window manager settings sort of thing. It might pose a problem if we are talking about third-party applets and you're importing those and they don't exist. Like, how do we handle that? I feel like that sort of ties into this better applet ID handling. Sarah, but if you would like to talk about that.
Yeah, so as I discovered from working on Status Notifier, the way that applets are identified in the panel config and internally is based on their the name that they're visualized with, like in the applet selector. Like if you have an applet called system tray, that's what it's referred to in the panel.ini, that's what it's referred to and stored as in the key config. Which means that if you change the name of an applet, such as from system tray to system tray xembed, it will suddenly stop working entirely, and you'll start getting that weirdness with, you know, moving applets around and they don't show up properly because there's an invisible applet that is messing with the configuration. So ideally, we would have some sort of unique ID that we would assign to each applet, like we would have, you know, org.buddiesofbudgie.status notifier tray. And then we would have the pretty name, and we would use the ID in order to keep track of the applets internally instead of the name. But the migration with that would be the concern because we would have to move from one system to the other.
So you're almost kind of proposing a naming scheme of like a reverse DNS, where you
Basically, yeah.
Okay, how does that fix the issues that we've had with like spacers? If it would,
That would it wouldn't necessarily fix it, though. No, it wouldn't fix it in and of itself, because the issue with spacers is that we have it has an applet in the saved configuration that has a specific name, and when it looks for that name, it can't find anything. So then it gets confused, and then some weird stuff happens internally. So then a ghost applet is created that messes with the order of applets and moving stuff around, and spacers and whatnot. Changing the unique ID would mean that that won't happen with our own applets if we decide to change the names, but it would require some additional fixing in order to make it not happen for third-party applets as well.
Yeah, I mean, this is something that we could almost have like a staggered approach for, where we could like, well, I guess really if we think about the applets, it's like, yes, unfortunately there's some that like Cyber, aka Stefan, Rick, and I know Evan, you worked on like, for example, your trash applet. There's like some coordination that would need to happen to make sure those are patched to have that reverse DNS name added. So we could possibly do that in advance before we roll it out in a 10.x release. Like, you know, give it a little while to make sure it's in all the different operating systems. There's a user
I think
story
maybe we could support both for Apple. Like we could use the name as a fallback for one minor
Sure.
release.
That would be
and then just make a note to applet developers, like message them like, hey, you need to update this because it will stop working in the next release. So just have a deprecation cycle instead of just breaking everything in one release.
Yeah.
So what would have to change again exactly?
You would have to add one field to the applet descriptor, to the plugin descriptor, that gives a reverse DNS ID for it. So like for an applet that I would make, it would be like com.searbit.
Yeah.
Something.
I was gonna say, because I thought I already did that for trash applet, but yeah, you're talking about okay, I understand.
Yeah.
And this is something that we could tie into like in terms of documentation and all that as well, where we provided steps for how to do that as an applet developer. I feel like if this is something that you want to take charge on because it's something that you seem to be quite passionate about, then you're welcome to move that over for 10. And we could also apply the lessons that we've learned for that on 11 as well. So we're starting to run out of time. We only have about half an hour left, so let's try to burn through these a bit quicker, because we also have to get to 11 and then MVP stuff and yada yada. So adherence to more free desktop standards. So this is one that I think, Sarabit, you wrote, and something I agree with. I think there's a lot of free desktop standards that we need to support, whether that's the upcoming, well, technically Status Notifier isn't, but it sort of is starting to become a free desktop standard.
The sad, unfortunate truth is that it is, but everything still uses the Ayatana and KDE APIs.
Yeah,
so even if we did expose the free desktop interface, nothing would use it. So it's in a weird limbo state right now.
So I think this is probably like a broader goal, but do you have anything more concrete besides this?
I still need to look into it a bit more, but the free desktop sound theme specification is at least from like looking around at it internally, it's a total mess. Just support in general for it. There's no concrete interface to find out what sound theme is actually being used. So like Kitty, for example, just kind of uses whatever it finds. Like it doesn't even attempt to use the configured theme. It just finds whatever sound it can and then uses that based on libcanberra, which I don't know if that's still being maintained in any meaningful capacity. Really. So it's a total mess, and I don't know if there's a better way to handle that, but there's that. There's some extra stuff in desktop files that we could handle, like running things on specific GPUs if they're launched from a specific desktop file. I don't know if your Budgie menu handles that actually, Evan, but
handles what?
There's a something was added to the desktop file specification where you can specify if you want it to be run on a discrete GPU or the integrated.
He did add support for that.
Yeah, so stuff like that, that that's kind of slipped through the cracks, but we could go back and try to support if it's within scope.
I would say that's good.
A quick note on that for the record is it does require a third-party thing called switcheroo, because that's what seems to be everyone else uses.
I honestly,
I haven't used any of that, so.
No, Solus doesn't even have a package. So.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a good objective. So.
Yeah.
Okay. We have general denomification. Use less GNOME provided things. I feel like this is incredibly broad, and we definitely should narrow this down in scope. So.
Yeah, the main thing that I know off the top of my head is the Bluetooth stuff, which recently became a thing more than it should have been with GNOME 42.
There's also the network indicator with stuff like using their network stuff versus something like libnm or just the dbus APIs directly.
I don't know. I'm not actually sure what all GNOME things are left, because I feel like we've been doing a pretty good job of ripping things out, because with the Budgie menu rewrite, we won't use Gmenu anymore.
I know. Oh my god, I'm so happy about that. But I mean, from like that entire thing is a mess too, especially when it comes to menu editors. But that's, I feel like, because everybody uses GNOME menus, so.
Yeah, it's kind of the de facto thing that everyone just assumes is the only thing.
Yeah, so we had the libnm. What was the other one that was mentioned?
Bluetooth.
Yeah, because there's like GNOME Bluetooth, and then there's a couple other APIs we could be using instead. I would love to use BlueZ directly instead of using GNOME Bluetooth personally, but I'm not going to touch that with a 10-foot pole.
I would also like that, because essentially, I think with the Bluetooth status indicators, it's just a wrapper over their entire thing.
Yeah, and so we would have to do some work in order to support it ourselves. What other dependencies do we actually have? Let me see. I'll just look at the Arch package. We got GNOME menus, GNOME session, GNOME themes, which obviously. Mutter, which we can't get rid of, and then some G-object stuff. I mean, the big one for me is Vala, which we can't get rid of because we would have to rewrite Budgie 10 in C, and that's Budgie 11. So.
Is it weird that I actually kind of like Vala?
No, because I do too. I think it has a lot of benefits over C in terms of like writing GTK code specifically.
It almost completely eliminates the amount of G-object and glib boilerplate that you need to have. I would say that's the biggest benefit of Vala. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. I was starting to think that was an outlier here.
No,
I just don't like Vala conceptually because it's the GNOME language, and it also has some really weird design decisions that I don't really get.
That's very true and fair.
What I don't like about Vala is that it's treated as a third-class citizen, even by GNOME. Like, they don't care at all about Vala.
They really don't. The documentation for Vala is just atrocious. I mean, there's valadoc.org, but even that, a lot of the methods aren't really detailed, and there's no tutorials, and there's a lot of things that are just kind of left unsaid. Like, how are you supposed to search for an annotation?
Yeah, in terms of that, it's really that GNOME has shifted towards Rust and C. And for people that aren't experienced with that, it's been like GJS for like the longest time. I would say even Python isn't that heavily used as much anymore.
Well, as we know from Solus, using Python for system components is a generally terrible idea.
Yeah, as somebody mentioned, Vala is kept alive by the community. Yeah, I mean, and by community, it's mostly elementary as far as I'm aware. At least they manage the Vala doc stuff. So
I didn't even realize that.
I'm not sure how long it will fly, like, because there was something between the founders of Elementary, so I'm not sure how long they will maintain that.
Yeah.
to touch on something Tadpole said, I don't see why we couldn't cooperate with the Cinnamon team in terms of getting. Well, I don't know about reusing some of their stuff for denotification, but they could have some insight on what directions we should take with that.
Yeah. So I quickly added another thing here because it reminded me for Bluetooth, and this is something that I've become really bothered by with my Bluetooth headphones, is I end up having to open up Budgie Control Center and like sometimes explicitly click to reconnect if like my iPhone, if my iPhone is like triggered and automatically enabled its Bluetooth, and I have to like go in and disable that, and then it's a complete mess. But also knowing battery power levels. So I added this card here for Bluetooth support. Oh yes, Pipewire instead of libgvc. That's actually why that period's there. Huh? What's this?
Yeah, I completely forgot about Pipewire until you started mentioning Bluetooth headphones. I was like, wait a minute. How did I not think of that?
I was actually looking into this, but the APIs weren't very clear to me in terms of how it exposes what applications are currently using that and what falls under Media Session API versus Pipewire itself. So this was actually something I was looking into as well. I just didn't get a good idea for it because I was also thinking about we need to just drop libgvc at some point and just use Pipewire because yes, I recognize there are operating systems like Solus at the moment that currently don't default to Pipewire. However, by and large, everybody else has switched over to it. And I want to make it clear, like, this isn't like me hating on Solus. This is because I know as somebody that used to work on Solus that it doesn't use it. That's like, want to make that clear.
And there are, not to say there aren't still issues with Pipewire when you're using it directly. Yeah. And because it's not a perfect pulse server, but I've been using it for like pretty much ever since Solus had it, and it's pretty damn good.
Yeah, I used it for a little bit when I was using Solus, but I've been daily using it on like Endeavor OS and Fedora. It's been like flawless for me. So
yeah,
especially when it comes to Bluetooth. Yeah, so generally speaking, I think we're all in agreement. Bluetooth support needs to be improved for 10 and take the lessons we learned there and apply them to 11 because we just need to improve the battery applet. We need to improve the Bluetooth applets, just all of that in general. Better clicking for reconnection and handling disconnection and all of that. So I'm going to move this over to goals.
Yeah,
it's funny that I think a lot of the improvements to Budgie 10 is really just improving applets.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Some subsystem stuff.
I'm
struggling.
All of these are good. I don't know how feasible this one is. I feel like this needs some investigation for what we want to do for the network applet. If we want to leverage what the Ubuntu Budgie people have done with their network applet, which I believe is a fork of one for Pantheon or something. I don't know.
Well, seeing as I've basically claimed it at this point, my stance on it is that this is my approach to software development in general. Thank you. My stance on this in general is that I don't like adding dependencies. If I can do something without adding a new dependency, that's how I'd like to do it. I would rather not use Granite because that would be adding an entire dependency.
No, that's like I know we're supposed to have discussions around all this, but
yeah, that's not happening.
For me personally, I'm against adding more toolkits on top of like what we're already using.
Unless it's libhandy. But anyway, but regardless, I would like ideally to use the dbus API, but I also know that working with it is going to be a pain. So I would like to use libnm because as far as I'm aware, that's what nm applet uses. It just uses libnm. So we would essentially just be creating a new front end for libnm.
And like the whole like network manager libnm stuff is a little weird because it's both developed within Free Desktop as well as shipped and like a separate issue tracker for GNOME as well. So it's like it's not wholly owned by GNOME, so I would consider like moving to libnm or something as a general de-gnomification.
My hesitancy is partially because of that gnomification of libnm, but I think it makes more sense to use libnm from a usability standpoint, because I don't see libnm being deprecated anytime soon, and it's not entirely owned by GNOME, so it seems like a decent path forward for that.
Okay. Well, I guess, okay, if we're looking at these, what do we realistically think should be in 10 versus things that are like this would be nice, however, like can be punted off to 11. Like, for instance, Bluetooth, should we be using BlueZ directly, or can that wait until 11? And then like this Pipewire stuff, can we live with using libgvc, or is this part where we should kind of dog food it and then have a compile time option where if you provide the Pipewire API, it'll be Pipewire instead of the libgvc?
I think that should be something that fall under 10, because that's something that we can reuse for 11. This is not wasted effort. So if we have time to pursue that in 10, why not do it?
Okay, we'll move that over. All right. So what about the BlueZ directly?
That's the same for me.
So all those things.
That's just me. I don't know how you feel about that, guys.
I think that would really be the best option.
I think I'm in agreement, because it would give us experience with all of those different libraries for when we eventually have to reuse them for Budgie 11.
Yeah.
And if we do a similar thing where we split things out between presentation and backend, well, then that makes it even easier going forward towards 11.
Yeah. And okay. Well, that's capping off this stuff finally. I feel like we're going to hit the time gate of 3 hours, unfortunately, but
I think we need another hour.
Yeah. So let's go ahead and look at this. What needs to happen for Budgie 10 to be considered properly complete, and the majority of time investment goes into 11? So I have some ideas. I want to just have a blanket of all of you having your ideas of what needs to be done for it to be considered complete. And we don't really think about 10 except for minor bug fixes and just focus on 11.
I do want to
is it basically all these goals? Like, are we wanting to make sure all these goals over here are done and then we're happy? Or is it like 90% of these goals and then just some sort of drawing the line in the sand or something?
I do want to preface this discussion with one thing. This specifically is a little reminiscent for me of the feature freeze of Budgie 10 that Solus did a while back. Because what I want to avoid happening is we get Budgie to a state where we're like, yeah, we're happy with these features. Let's work on Budgie 11, and then we just don't.
Yeah. And that's why I put like majority of time investment. So it's not just a straight up feature freeze, but that we're like, okay, we're happy with not spending 100% of our time on Budgie 10. It's time to actually shift our focus to Budgie 11. It's kind of, maybe that would be a better way of phrasing it. But like, what needs to happen for us to actually fully shift over or shift the majority of our time over to?
I would say just changing properly to mostly would cover my concerns with it.
I think we have a lot of stuff in there that actually span Budgie 10 and Budgie 11 anyway. So it's not like we are spending all of our time on Budgie 10, but also laying some groundwork for 11, like all the Bluetooth stuff, Pipewire, as well as application tracking, API, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, why don't you go ahead and like maybe copy the cards that we feel should be over here, like for what needs to happen?
Because like for the Pipewire stuff, couldn't we make that I don't know if this would be ideal because of packaging complexity, but couldn't we theoretically make a separate project that's Apache licensed, do the Pipewire stuff in there, and then just add it as a sub project or sub module like GVC is? Well,
that's the question: is do we even really need to do that, or are we just going to be leveraging like media session APIs and all that? If you
Yeah,
see me
sounds
looking around for stuff, I'm trying to find. I think because my Bluetooth headphones are gonna die soon. So here we go.
How
It's yelling
tragic.
at me. I know it's yelling at me that I have an hour left, which is funny because by that time the meeting will be over, so it doesn't really matter. But
Yeah.
all right, so go ahead and copy over what you're happy with, and then we could think about 11. We have better applet ID. I'll delete that one.
Tadpole asks, what distribution are you using right now, Josh?
I am currently using Endeavor OS, but and by the way, I didn't miss your message about Fedora earlier. I was just distracted by this workshop. But to answer your question from earlier about what the status of the Fedora stuff is, it's ready on my laptop. However, I want to actively dog food it on my desktop and on my work laptop. In order to do that, I need to actually put time aside to like back up a bunch of work stuff on my work laptop and deal with all that on my desktop as well. Before I flash Fedora on here on my desktop and my work laptop. But that's still going to happen. I'm committed to being the maintainer of Budgie under Fedora, because I'm also very happy with, like, I just trust Cerebit to do the smart thing when it comes to Endeavor OS, and I'll also have it on my personal laptop. And if worse comes to worse, there's still maintainers that currently exist in the Arch trusted users that are capable, in theory, of updating it under Arch. So, but in terms of what I'm using on my work laptop and my desktop, I'm using Endeavor OS. And on my personal laptop, I have Fedora. So, but that's going to kind of all switch around. And then Julianne uses Fedora. Cerebit also uses Endeavor OS. Evan uses Solus. And Budgie will not make it before the Fedora 36. So I actually, when I was speaking to Neil about this, which is like, if you don't know Neil in the Fedora community, then I'd learn more about the Fedora community. But he's very popular in the Fedora community. But Neil, aka like Conan, Kudo, whatever. Him and I have had a lot of conversations about this, and it doesn't have to make it in before the release of 36. I could have it basically be in Rawhide, and then ask for it to be backported to 36, and it won't be a problem whatsoever. So it's like no worries that if it doesn't happen in 36, because it could always happen later, and be included in 36. So, but what I'll probably be doing is running on my work laptop 36, and then on my desktop I'll be running like Rawhide or whatever, because I need my work laptop to be super stable, and I need my desktop to be this machine that I can tinker with and not be worried if it explodes, because I'll be at home and I could dedicate the time to fixing it. So yeah. Okay, so it looks like, are people done copying things for this board?
I was going
I
to
think
ask
so.
if someone could like maybe make a box grouping the Bluetooth stuff together, because I think that's all going to be just one thing.
Could do.
And I'm not sure if that's drawing a shape or a frame.
Yeah, it
or...
is. Yeah, it's a shape, and it automatically has like a text widget thing here. So.
Ah, okay.
No, it's kind of sort of devilry as this fancy stuff. There we go.
Oh, the libnum probably doesn't involve Bluetooth.
Oh, yeah.
That'd be very strange.
That would be very. I mean, technically, if you're anyway. Okay, so this is pretty good. I think this gives us a good idea of what we need to accomplish in 10 before we're happy shifting the majority of our focus over to 11. And that doesn't mean like not tinkering with 11 and coming up with ideas for it and making sure that what we're developing can also apply to 11. Just what we would be happy with as a collective to shift primary development over. And this doesn't mean freezing development of 10. It just means working mainly on 11 because it has to happen at some point. You know, we can't like be stuck in this phase where we're only working on 10 for the rest of time. Okay, with 16 minutes left, we could finally get to Budgie 11. So we better plow through this. All right. So I already have some ideas here, and I moved some over, of course. Wayland only, because by the time 11 is out, I personally believe that it'll be ready. And worst comes to worst, if it isn't, you could technically have an X window that is just the entire root window within an X Wayland thing and sort of get around that, and it wouldn't necessarily be any worse than current X servers. So that's an option. I also put tutorial/guided tour in here. So the idea is, this is kind of based on our conversation regarding like the welcome app stuff from yesterday, is also guiding the user through like, you know, click on this button. Oh, look, it's a menu. Click on this button. Oh, it's Raven. You know, click this thing in the center of your screen. Oh, wow, look, it's this this workspace switcher, or here, like use these shortcuts, or like open up this app, and so on and so forth, and like a guided tour through Budgie. So I think this would be good to really to make it as approachable to non-Linux users as possible. Because I would like to have it to the point where, you know, there might be operating systems out there where they prefer Budgie over GNOME, as an example, GNOME Shell, and have it be their default version, and it works really good for like OEMs and that sort of thing. So I'd written that one. I wrote down advanced tiling capabilities. So the reason why I wrote down advanced tiling capabilities was I really want side by side. So like three horizontal, three windows vertically, but in a horizontal view. I want like quad tiling and more tiling window manager like capabilities within Budgie 11. So then multi-monitor panel support. My understanding is David, aka Foss Freedom, he actually has a draft PR currently up, I think.
Yes, he does. For the beginnings of multi-monitor panel support.
Yes. I think there's a lot of discussions that still need to happen there regarding like what behavior we expect when the primary display is no longer the primary, and how do we gracefully swap between that panel versus the panel that used to be on the other screen, and so on and so forth. So there needs to be more conversation there, but in general, I think everybody wants multi-panel support. And if I have to go a few more years without being able to have a panel on one of my other monitors so I could use it when I'm gaming, I'm gonna lose my mind. So there's that. Support for basically more multi-arch. So the Ubuntu Budgie people already support ARM through for Raspberry Pi, for Ubuntu Budgie Raspberry Pi. So I don't have to worry about that too much, I don't think. However, I would personally kind of like RISC-V. I'm personally willing to like buy the hardware at some point and make sure that it works under that. But
So
I don't know.
do they actually use RISC-V?
There's like open source boards for it, but basically no.
Like Raspberry Pi equivalents that you can get.
Yeah.
There's not many, but there's a couple of them.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
So like Beagle board kind of things. But I just kind of like it to exist. Because it's like
I just made one. Sorry, continue.
I was just gonna say because it's like open source hardware and that sort of thing. Ooh, you broke that down into. Oh, I like that. Nice.
I also made the middle ones for you because I know that one was bothering you quite a bit.
Yes, that bothers me a lot. So another card I wrote was extensible Budgie menu. So basically what I mean by that is both the concept of search portals, like kind of like what GNOME Shell has, as well as different views for it, whether that's icon grid or full screen. So these kind of go hand in hand here. But then I will go ahead and let people talk about these two cards here, as well as this libc agnostic and so on and so forth. So
I'll just quickly touch on libc agnostic. I like muscle, and I want us to make sure that Budgie 11, because I know Budgie 11 can, or Budgie 10 can compile with muscle because it's being used in, I think, Void. And they submitted a patch to Budgie Screensaver to make sure that it compiles on muscle. But I'd like to ensure for Budgie 11 that we can support alternative libcs besides just glibc.
No, I think that's a completely reasonable goal. But we also need to, when we think about that, we need to make sure EFL also supports puzzle as well.
I seem to recall that I looked into it, and
I think it does. I think it does.
But that does warrant more investigation.
So we have this proper front/back end separation. I think we all understand what that is, but do we want to cover that card regardless? Go ahead.
No, I don't think there is anything to add on that. Like, just avoid the mess that we have in 10, and that's it.
Yeah, fair enough. Avoid messes. I like that. Yeah. Powerful applet API and good doc.
Yeah, I think we have quite a good applet API, albeit a bit limited in 10. The problem is that the doc is non-existent. We have some old stuff, but yeah, not really enough to create simple applets. So the way to do that is basically to look at existing applets. And if you don't understand anything about the existing Linux ecosystem, yeah, you are stuck. You can't do anything.
Yeah.
I wonder if that should be something that's not related to either Budgie 11 or 10, but kind of its own separate thing. Because that really.
Yeah, I mean, and this
really
is something that
addressed.
absolutely needs to happen with the documentation center, is have a step-by-step guide of here's how you get started with like it being in C, Vala, and Python, and
yeah, kind of like creating your first package. We had that on Solus, like packaging Nano. I think we could have something like, hey, this is a simple applet. You can compile that like that, and test that like that, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, even if it's something that spits out a GDK label that says like "Hello World" or something in your panel, or like something that also walks the user through like Budgie popovers would be good as well. And settings, actually, like if we had that where like you had a setting which would be able to change the label, like that could work. And but that's really good. I think it makes sense for 11, but also just the general user story of documentation across 10 and 11 needs to be improved. So small memory footprint, I feel like this is sort of going to happen regardless, because we're going to be spending all this time doing optimization and not using Vala.
EFL in general is a very light toolkit, which should help.
Yeah. And also the fact that we won't be using Vala also means that we won't have to deal with some of their inefficiencies as well. All right, and then we get on to the other one, which is Wayland only. So I guess the question is, are we all in agreement that it should be Wayland?
Yeah, I'm actually not.
Okay.
Because Wayland sure is great, like it's faster, all that kind of stuff. But problem is that not everybody is using that or can even use that. Like I have an NVIDIA card, I can't use Wayland with that.
At this current moment in time, yes. But if you think about it, like a year and a half, 2 years from now, like, do we think?
I don't think it will change. Like NVIDIA will still be NVIDIA.
They've made it pretty clear that they don't actually care.
Well,
so I guess then the question is, how do we support both?
It is worth noting that NVIDIA are turning around a bit on their stance on Wayland, in that they've stopped refusing to use the industry standard. I don't know what it is. It's EGL streams versus GBM, but whichever one they wanted to stick their head in the sand and use, they've decided to just go with what everyone else is using, which I think is GBM. So in theory, NVIDIA should be improving their Wayland support over time. I don't have a timeline for that, and because it's NVIDIA, it could take like 5 or 10 years for them to actually put in the work for it.
Yeah.
The question for me is, by the time we get to the point where we're starting to turn Budgie 11 into a minimum viable product, is it worth it to make an X11 compositor window manager for it to support that use case, or is the experience good enough on all hardware to just use Wayland? I think this is something that we'd have to evaluate later.
I think X11 will still be relevant because people will also have old hardware that won't support Wayland and that will never support Wayland. The question is like, do we want to have those kind of users, or do we just want to tell to them that they can't use Budgie because they have to buy another graphic card or that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I mean, and what sort of like, I guess then is like, what doesn't support Wayland at that point? Like, how old of hardware are we talking about? Are we talking about GPUs that were released like 15 years ago? You know, like, kind of need to like draw a line somewhere. But I mean, I think this might be something that's sort of clear as we work on Budgie 11, what the feasibility is of supporting both. Because if we think about it from the concept of the X11 APIs, you know, like we would have to like define structs and position windows through that versus, you know, Wayland. And does that compromise our ability to do window tracking, or are we going to make sure that we support both Wayland and X11 there already? And like a lot of unanswered stories or unanswered questions.
So the concern. Sorry, Evan, continue.
I was just wondering how X Wayland also fits in all of this as well.
Right.
Because could that alleviate any of these concerns, or
exactly?
What I'm seeing in hardware, so I just looked on the Debian wiki for Wayland to see what the hardware requirements are, and at least to me, it looks like old AMD cards should be fine because support is up to the community driver, which, you know, people could add support if they want to. I'm pretty sure most older AMD cards should support Wayland. The issue is that supporting Wayland in the NVIDIA driver currently relies on NVIDIA to add support, which means that I doubt they're going to be adding GBM support to older cards that are, you know, out of service for the currently supported driver.
Right, and then we start getting into the story about Nouveau and all that. So yeah, I mean, I guess in this maybe a way of looking at this, instead of being Wayland only, is Wayland focused with an X11 fallback of some sort.
I'm fine with that. Yeah,
I think it's going to be necessary.
Yeah,
I would love it if we could just do Wayland, but it seems like at the moment we're probably good. Like, and there's no reason to say that we couldn't drop the X11 backend at some point if the situation improves.
Right.
But I think that for the initial product of Budgie 11, I think it's worth having both.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm glad we at least came to a decision on that. So VRR support, we have 3 minutes left in this time gate. Of course, if other people, if you guys don't have anything you need to go to, we can untime gate it. But
I'm fine with staying for
maybe
longer, but
actually I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to use something a little different. I'm going to use the voting mechanism. Actually, I'm going to use the voting in Google Meet. Okay. And I'm not going to, let's not comment on it. Let's just go ahead and do a poll. So I'm going to start a poll on time gate. Yes. No. And I'm going to launch it. Okay. And you should be able to open it from the right-hand side. And I'm not going to look at it. I will take a sip of water and let me know when all of you have voted. Because obviously, you know, it's all up to you about.
Yeah, I voted.
I have voted.
Evan, have you voted?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, that answers it. All three votes are yes. Wow.
Head is wheeling.
Okay.
Yeah, but I think I can just stay like 30 or 40 minutes more.
Okay. Well,
yeah, I'm only kind of thinking like 30 minutes.
All right, let's go ahead and do that. So let's
Okay.
Yeah. So 30 more minutes. So let's do right. So Wayland focused with X11 fallback. Sarah, do you want to talk about the variable refresh rate support?
if we do not have variable refresh rate support, I am leaving Budgie. But yeah, on a more serious note, so I have a FreeSync monitor and an AMD GPU, and I've been using variable refresh rate for a while. And the X11 support for variable refresh rate is awful. It only works if you have one monitor that supports variable refresh rate, and that's the only monitor that you're using. If you have any additional monitors connected, unless they're disabled explicitly, variable refresh rate disables itself, even if you have a full screen application with the capacitor disabled. It's so bad. And there are, I don't remember if it's Plasma or GNOME that doesn't support it properly, but it's still an issue with with some desktop environments. And I want that to be something that we ship with as soon as Budgie 11 comes out.
I feel like this has to be Wayland only, though, given how, like, we would basically just have a single X11 root window, right? Otherwise.
Yeah, and ultimately, I think that the overlap between hardware that supports Wayland and hardware that supports variable refresh rate, like, I don't think there's an NVIDIA card that supports Wayland or that supports variable refresh rate that doesn't support Wayland. Right. So, yeah, ultimately,
proper window tracking. This is something that we would solve as well.
Yeah.
So like for VRR, you would have like what 144 hertz is like what you would probably be thinking about, or
that's what I'm currently using with VRR. Yeah.
Of course, now we have what 300 and 480 and
whatever
freaking
for elite gamers. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So they could play CS:GO at that rate, but no other games.
Yeah, just CS:GO or Overwatch, I guess, if they can get it working through Bluetooth.
Fractional scaling. So this is something that we could handle better by virtue of both EFL as well as just the Wayland aspect of it. I don't know how well we could handle it with X11. You can theoretically handle it, but I feel like then at that point it comes down more to the toolkit rather than a window manager and compositor level.
I mean, we would also have to support it with, in terms of like widget scaling, like we're doing with like we already touched on with the applets in Budgie 10.
Yep. I'm just gonna try to open up, what is it called? Elementary, which it's not showing up here, so maybe I forgot to install it. But there's like a elementary configuration, and by elementary, it's actually like the name of some sort of UI thing in the EFL world. I don't remember what it's for, but there's actually like a fractional scaling mode that you could enable, and it seems to work quite well. So we might just kind of get that for free by using EFL.
Well, sweet. So, that would be nice.
Different monitor refresh rates. I
do want to touch on that as well. So the way that I think Windows handles this best, because the way that Windows handles different monitor refresh rates is that if a window is on a monitor without any edges or any parts of it on a different monitor, it will render at that monitor's refresh rate. So if you have a 144 hertz monitor and you have a 60 hertz monitor, if a window is on the 144 hertz monitor, it will render at 144 hertz.
Right.
If you move it between two monitors, it will render at whatever the minimum refresh rate is of those two. And then if you move it over to the other, it'll stay at that.
Yeah, because otherwise you start introducing screen tearing and all sorts of weirdness.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's a really good way to handle it. The way that Linux does it is that, or at least X11, the way that X11 does it is it just takes whatever the minimum refresh rate is and just renders everything at that refresh rate for both monitors, except the cursor, which is rendered at whatever refresh rate of the monitor it's on because it's handled by hardware. So I would like to see more Windows-style refresh rate handling in Budgie 11, where everything that's on my primary monitor would be rendered at 144, and then everything that's on my secondary monitor would be rendered at 60, and then the hardware cursor would be handled the same.
Yeah. Okay. Those are all good options. I see one was added for accessibility and screen reader support and all that. I think that's good if that wants to be touched on.
But I don't know, like, what's the stories with EFL? Do they have toolkit around that? I don't know at all.
I'm not sure either. But I mean, the accessibility story, let's be honest, in Linux just is awful. in general.
It really
And
is. It really
it
is.
seems like most people end up just using Orca, even if they're not using GNOME at all, because it seems like the de facto screen reader. So I guess making sure that it's able to somehow better read like widgets or something, that would be nice.
EFL does have in elementary, it has a method to communicate with accessibility technologies.
Okay,
So there is some support for it in EFL that we could use.
good.
At least in Elm. In Elm specifically. I don't know about anything else.
So
But
these are some good
warrants
options,
support.
but is there anything else that we could think of? Because obviously there's like probably 400 million things that we want to do regarding applets as well. I guess brand new.
Well, since you mentioned applets, I would say that for Budgie 11, I think if we get all of our 10 applets to a state where we're happy with them, then for Budgie 11, we should at least make sure that we have applets that can do the same features in much the same ways or presentations. So it's not a complete jarring thing when it's released and people update and it's like, oh god, what is this? I don't know where anything is.
So feature parity for applets, which I think we all would agree on. We don't want to really introduce a regression like existed for like going from GNOME 2 to GNOME 3. A bunch of, I mean, that was like an entire UX change, but just the general regression in functionality.
Yeah, and for what needs to exist for Budgie 11 MVP, I already put down a card that says Budgie 10 feature parity.
Okay, cool. Well, the problem with Budgie 10 feature parity is that sort of includes this one, which is this power strip in Raven. That
Didn't
may
we
not
already
be.
do that?
I don't remember if I ended up ripping it out yet, or because what I did do was have it where it's hidden by default. I don't know if I ripped it out yet though. I would like to. I hope I did. If maybe that could even be a 10.7 thing. I don't know.
Do I even have it enabled?
I'm pretty sure it's sitting on Solus.
Oh,
no, it's
disabled.
definitely disabled by default.
It's disabled by default. Yeah, I don't know anyone that uses it.
Okay.
What else? What was I thinking of?
So maybe I could change this to applet feature parity instead in this MVP.
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
Okay, thank you. Let me go ahead and drop this then. Okay. So, right. So it seems like we're in agreement in the idea of like these cards, right? This Wayland focused one, VRR, all of that, right? As being agreed upon goals, right? Okay.
Yeah.
Nobody said no, so right. Multi-monitor panel support. I think everybody's in agreement with that, correct?
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Because like, even if you don't want it, or like you don't plan on using it, it doesn't hurt to actually. Tutorial/guided tour. Do we think this is something of value? Or do you think that there may be some other mechanism that we can leverage for providing somebody a guided tour or introduction to Budgie 11, whether that's like just generalized improvements to documentation or this guided tour?
I think if we have a guided, because I don't like guided tours, but I'm not opposed to having one so long as there's a mechanism by which it doesn't start up automatically. Like we could have a dialogue that says, would you like a guided tour of Budgie? And then you click yes, and then it starts it. I would rather it not just like you start Budgie and then it goes, here's this thing, here's this thing, here's this thing, because I can't stand that in UIs personally.
I'm just wondering if we couldn't just have like a YouTube video for that instead of trying to build something directly.
We could. I guess the benefit of it being built in directly is it could be translatable.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Or another thing is it could be a separate application that it's set to auto start.
Yeah.
By default the first time, have the pop up, do you want to see blah blah blah, yes, no. And if they finish it, or if they choose no, then it's removed from auto start. And
Yeah. Okay.
of course, then that opens to the thing of that would also have to be packaged separately, and I guess it wouldn't be the worst thing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like when you think about the packaging story for Budgie, it's going to be it's going to be much more significant than it is much more significant than what it is currently, because we're going to have our dedicated control center. We're going to have Budgie WM. We're going to have Budgie panel. We're going to have like these different libraries that we've developed that are leveraged by multiple components. And
yeah, that is one thing I've been thinking of, is kind of splitting the repositories out more, because in Budgie 10, I don't know anyone else, but I find it very difficult to find anything in the code base.
Yes.
If I don't already know where it is.
Yeah, I agree. It is, unless you're looking into applets, which I do a lot of, it's very difficult to find where anything actually lies.
Well, even then, because some of the applet names are not intuitive. Because what is it like? Is it one of the trays or? Anyway, this is getting into the weeds, I think.
Yeah.
I was even wondering if we shouldn't split the applet into their own repositories at one point. This way we can just release the applet without having to bump a Budgie version.
Yeah.
Or at the very least, have a central grouped repository where the applets live, and have that be its own thing.
Yeah, something like that.
Maybe, because I think there are some applets that we should have in the main repository, just like ones that are like Budgie menu, for example, I think should be pretty core too. That we should ship it with Budgie. But I think for like extra applets, it might be worth having an extra repository for stuff that isn't going to be used by default.
Well, I think this also sort of dives into stuff about stakeholders as well. Is like, is it really fair that, and maybe they want this to happen, or they want to continue this, and that's obviously entirely up to them. But for example, with like the Ubuntu Budgie people, is it entirely fair that they have to maintain their own Budgie extras thing that is not necessarily promoted side by side or shipped? Well, actually, quite regularly it's shipped by distributions, but at least available in the repository. Having some sort of Budgie community org or whatever we decide to call it, where we have a bunch of just repositories there of all of their stuff and a bunch of community things too. I don't know. I feel like that might get a little into the weeds. But
I actually just had a thought for Budgie 10. What if because if we do the whole reverse DNS thing, what if we have, this would make it a lot easier to differentiate, because right now, if you install Budgie extras, you have a bunch of applets that are community developed, but they're right next to the official ones, and there's no way to differentiate them. What if in the applet selector, we have a header for official applets and then a header for community applets, so that people can tell the difference between which ones we make and then which ones are extra?
I'm kind of against, because that gives the idea that we, again, prefer a certain set of applets above anyone else's, and
maybe bundled instead of official, because I do think it's worth differentiating them, just because there are distros that like Endeavor, which shouldn't ship Budgie extras but does, and it modifies a lot of the functionality and gives
to the point where it actually ends up breaking my like I had a lot of functionality that was broken, which I mean that's a complete other thing where that could just be improvements to the applet so they don't break things. But
it also kind of sounds to me like a packaging problem.
That definitely is. But I do think that and also for the record, I'm not saying that we should keep like them separate. Like if there is a community applet like your trash applet that's really well liked and that we think we could pull into the bundled applets, I don't think that's an issue at all. I just think that we should have maybe even just like a distinction of like, we put the reverse DNS in the applet description so that you can see who made the applet. That would even be better for discoverability.
Or maybe not necessarily like official versus unofficial or community, but having like just a link to the website and the name of the author or something in the app.
Yeah, like we could look at the ways that stuff like IDEs, for example, that have plugins that you can install that could be made by various different vendors. We could
Yeah.
look into that and see if there's a way to sort of incorporate that UX into how we handle applets.
But this does
That
get
would
into
be
the,
good, yeah.
this does get into the question though of like how do we package Budgie 11 with, given everything would be separated, right? Like how do we say this is the de facto default way that we want Budgie 11 to work? You know, for people like Arch and Endeavor OS, or you know, maybe if Solus would want to like quote unquote adopt like the vanilla version of Budgie, like how do we communicate that versus?
We can just have sub-repositories. Like in the main tree, we include the repositories of the applets that should be shipped, always shipped with
Oh, it's like
Budgie as
Git
sub-repositories.
submodules.
Yeah, submodules, sorry. Yeah. This way, when you package Budgie, you can pull those applets and they are always included with Budgie. Like the icon task list for task list, sorry, is part of the default experience, I think. Same for the menu, like yeah.
I'm just
I
not
do. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I'm not sure why it's to be different from, I guess, now, because we can decide, we can say, hey, this repository, be it a set of applets, is a required runtime dependency of whatever Budgie, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And then we must have some way to identify default panel layouts anyway, right? So wouldn't that just be that? What I'm trying to say is, how would this be different from what we're already doing?
Yeah. This is definitely something that is worth discussing, that might not be worth diving into at this point.
Yeah, maybe not right now because we're on limited time.
Yeah. All right.
But
So
table for later for sure.
So I think we all agree, brand new control center, right?
There is something I do want to touch on with the brand new control center though. I think we do need one. I would rather not be using the GNOME one, but the amount of effort required to make a brand new control center might be, at least in my eyes, higher if we want feature parity than making a whole new desktop.
I don't think we need feature parity for GNOME Control Center.
You don't think so?
No, because I think there's a lot of things in there that I don't feel are absolutely necessary to be in like MVP. For example, like firewall stuff and flat pack permission modifications. Like if I was to open up Control Center now and take a look, like online accounts, I don't think needs to be in there because there isn't going to be anything in Budgie 11 that's really going to tie into that. Of course, that does raise the question of like, how do people tie into that with like GNOME applications? But I feel like, if anything, that's kind of their problem to some degree, or something we could pursue later on. If I take a look, printers, like that needs to happen. Removable media management, like what to do with CD audio and DVD video. Like, do we really need that? I don't know. But I feel like a brand new control center or something that might not necessarily have feature parity might be worth having. But
I think it's worth targeting feature parity, even if there's stuff that we miss for the minimum viable product, because I don't want to do the GNOME thing of introducing a replacement that doesn't have all the functionality in it.
Yeah.
That I feel would just be kind of a disservice to the stakeholders.
But of course, given the fact that, you know, this is going to be iterated on separately, it's the nice thing is we could release something like Budgie 11 and then still iterate on the control center without having to release a completely different version of Budgie. So
yeah, that's what I was thinking. Like, if we need to keep working on the control center outside of Budgie 11, like we release Budgie 11 with the new desktop and the new icon, the new desktop stuff and the new screensaver and all that, and then we keep the old control center if the new one isn't ready yet.
Yeah, I guess we'll have to quantify down the road what we would consider just a subset of the MVP. Is like, what's an MVP for the control center? So,
Yeah, I think that would be something that we would need to consider separate from the Budgie 11 desktop MVP, because it is essentially at this point it's a separate product.
yeah. I see somebody added better desktop icons, arbitrary dragging, and I'm not sure how to feel about that, but
I don't use desktop. I was the one who added it. I don't use desktop icons, but I think it's worth having for the people that do.
I've actually been toying and kind of stopped toying with recently, doing a separate desktop icon thing, because the thing that keeps coming up is, why can't I drag my icons? And I'm getting sick of hearing it.
it's because the
So-
implementation through GDK stuff is absolutely awful. Where it's like, okay, you would have to do something with the GDK grid, but then you have to store the positions,
Yeah.
and then you have to make sure they don't overlap. And what if the monitor changes? Well, in that case, the window gets repositioned, but then the grid size changes in the terms of the rows and the columns, and therefore you need to shift stuff over. But then what happens to all the positions? And then you get overlap. It's just, that's why I didn't do it, and why it's just a flow box. So
Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe not for the MVP, but I think it's worth considering for Budgie 11 overall. Because EFL might make it easier. We don't know.
yeah, it might, or it might just be as bad. I don't know, but if we come up with the solution, or like Evan, if you come up with the solution where it's like, here's an EFL implementation for Budgie desktop view that has all the things that we want and they want, I would say do a PR, and we could just replace the existing desktop view with the.
Yeah, we don't even have to add that to Budgie 11. We could just do that whenever.
Yeah, that's kind of its own thing on its own anyway.
Yeah.
So,
So yeah, we could
At least have it there.
move that over if we want to.
because I don't know about basing it on my work, because I also experimented with doing it in Rust, Indeed, just to try various other things.
Yeah. Okay. Really good workspace manager. Obviously we need to survey what that would be, but I think just in general workspace improvements just kind of have to happen at G11.
Agreed.
Let's move these up here. Okay, so we have tutorial, guide tutorial. I think we agreed on that to some form.
Yeah.
It doesn't
Yeah,
necessarily even
and-
have to be MVP, but just having it at some point would be nice.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where we ourselves probably would never use it, but it's worth having for
Yeah.
other users or stakeholders, whatever we're calling them. Better
Especially-
discoverability.
Especially for people who don't really understand how the Linux desktop workflow works if they're moving from Windows or Mac.
Yeah.
It'd be nice to give them a sort of indication about where to find different things.
That's a good point too.
How long is the workshop going to be today? It's going to be going on for 9 more minutes, is what we agreed on.
Yep.
Okay, advanced tiling capabilities. Personally, I'm going to lose my mind if I'm not able to tile more on this monitor that I have. We live in the world of people running like 47-inch TVs basically at like 4 or 5K. They need to be able to do more than put things side by side, like one
Corner and
one-
vertical tiling would be fantastic.
So
Even if it's just the same thing that we're doing now, where it's dragged to the side or dragged to the corner or dragged to the top. Yeah.
all right. Support for, I mean, this is like sort of a packaging thing than anything. It's nice to like just explicitly say we're going to support RISC-V, we're going to support ARM, and we're going to support
The difficulty then would be dependency, because like us supporting it wouldn't be too big of an issue because we're not doing anything in assembly. We're probably not doing anything that doesn't have universal APIs, but dependencies might not be compiled for RISC-V or ARM. So I guess it would just have to be like on our end, we're like, yes, everything we're doing supports RISC-V and ARM. And then maybe pushing forward initiatives in the desktop space in order to get our dependencies working on ARM as well and RISC-V.
I feel like I mean, honestly, I'm looking at all these. I don't see us not doing any of these, to be honest.
Yeah.
Or am I wrong?
Yeah, I think it's okay.
We just move all these then. Instead of moving them one by one. Okay. Now we get on to one thing, which is what needs to exist for Budgie 11 MVP. So for me personally, I'm going to move over tiling. And also, I feel like this Wayland. Oh, somebody's already moving it. Yeah.
I'm moving
Okay. So my idea of using Tommel instead of G settings, it doesn't necessarily have to be Tommel, but I feel like that's sort of like the most obvious choice compared to like YAML or JSON or something, because it's like more approachable from a human readable and human modifiable perspective than say JSON. And it has more constructs than something like any, and it's also not G settings and decomp. And something we didn't really discuss would be like protobuf support and how we communicate stuff, but I feel like that could be a different discussion. So I won't get into that. But do we feel like an expose mode needs to happen for Windows 11? Well, Windows 11 I believe has one, but for Budgie 11, geez.
I'm struggling. Something's in the back and it shouldn't be.
Do you want me to move it for
This.
you?
No, I got it. I got it. It was
Okay.
that the Wayland focused was in the back, so it would show up behind the what needs to exist for Budgie. There we go. That's better.
But do we think that expose should be part of the MVP?
I think it'd be really nice to have for sure.
Okay, so a goal, but not.
I would say goal. Yeah,
Okay.
not something that we have.
Okay. Multi-monitor panel support.
I think if we're re-architecting the panel stuff anyway, because we're going to have to, I think
Yeah.
that could come pretty naturally. So
Yeah, that's
I would
kind of a
put that in.
byproduct of what has to happen anyway.
Send to back. Oh,
Where's the
fuck?
Yeah, if you send it back, then the text disappears, and I
Oh,
can't
okay.
figure out what.
Hold on.
sorry,
Can you move that back?
Here, I'll do this. I'll just send all of the stuff we have over here to the front, so then it should properly show up on the other side.
Oh, here, I have an idea. If I do send it back and then send it back. There we go. Okay. All right. Feel like brand new control center in some form needs to happen, and we could always discuss later on what that actually is.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I mean, we need one to expose the EFL related stuff, and we're gonna have to like probably merge Budgie desktop settings into the control center anyway, so it may as well be a new thing. Because otherwise, we're gonna have to do that in the context of like all the GNOME control center panels and that sort of thing, and then duplicate the effort. And I feel like that just doesn't really make too much sense.
Yeah, and we also want to think about are we going to get into the situation, and where are we kind of in the situation of like on Windows control center versus settings?
Exactly. Yeah. Panel configuration, presets, and then Tommel instead of G settings are these things that, because I mean, if we're doing all the panel stuff, that includes panel configuration, which then means
it's kind of
we have to save it somewhere, and we're not going to be saving a G setting, so I feel like Tommel could be an option.
So I'm pretty sure that we said we wanted to completely break, what's the right way to say this? Like completely just not use the old settings that are currently in G settings. Is that right?
Yes, however, it's worth noting that we still can do some form of a transition by...
Yes, that's what my question would be. Could we transition?
Yeah, we could read in the old settings through something like my libdconf go, which I could actually technically rewrite in something like Rust and Surd to serialize and deserialize the Tommel, and then write that out to whatever our configuration format would be. Like I feel like that would be much more trivial, like 90% of the other things.
Well, yeah, actually, thinking about it, that'd be pretty easy no matter what route you go.
You could literally just also do it in like Bash and do it like line by line. It would be terrible, but you could do it.
There's an idea.
Oh no. Advanced tiling capabilities. What are our thoughts there? At the very least, like this quad tiling and more horizontal.
I would definitely like to see more tiling options right out the gate.
Yeah, me too.
Okay. Workspace manager. Was that something that was agreed on for MVP, or is that a nice to have?
What's the workspace manager again?
So it would be like a new, like potentially like a new strip at the bottom. I mean, we need to survey it, but and then theoretically, like being able to program that certain apps go to certain workspaces and that sort of thing.
I think I already moved that to the MVP.
Oh, did you?
Because if we don't have
Oh, yeah, you did.
workspace management, people are gonna complain anyway. So
Yeah.
we need to have something that is usable at the very least. And advanced styling, I'm gonna remove that because that's the big one that we have already.
Yeah. Okay, so support for this. I did just realize, yeah, I have been moving them instead of copying them. That's my bad.
I have also been moving instead of copying.
I'll go back and like move them back over or whatever I've messed up personally. Okay, I feel like these three are kind of things that we should do, because I mean, when it comes to the proper, I mean, this is just an architectural thing of data versus presentation layer. So this is kind of something we've already agreed on, and it's kind of necessary when we think of it from the Wayland perspective. And then the API stuff, I feel like that kind of needs to happen as we develop it for EFL anyways. And I feel like it's a target.
The question is like, will we have the applet API at the get-go, or will we have I don't know, some kind of limited API at the beginning just to transition the existing applet to Budgie 11 and then increase the possibility of this API?
Right.
Yeah. Because
there's already so much on the.
Yeah.
I think we're about to say the same thing, that we already have so much on the plate that for some things we're going to have to accept that we just have to do the minimum thing that we have now for 10 at the start of 11 and then iterate beyond that.
Yeah.
And I think this might be one of those things.
I'm just wondering if the lack of applet API support how massively would that hamper adoption of 11, especially with something like Ubuntu Budgie, where, you know, if this comes out, they might have to deal with either shipping without any applets of their own, or dealing with, you know, potentially an LTS or something that.
Yeah, but I think we'll have to have an API at the beginning anyway, because we intend on having this kind of applet architecture, like the menu will be an applet and all that kind of stuff. So we want separation. So we'll have an API at the beginning, just a limited one, not the powerful one.
I guess what do we consider powerful versus limited?
Yeah. I think the one that we really should have is the one that we currently have in Budgie, like have those kind of possibilities. When I say powerful, I was more like in GNOME, for example, you can kind of just completely change the way the compositor is working. It was more like that, integrate the work.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, I would say an applet API. Maybe we could just have applet API here, and then have the other one is outside of MVP. Alternative UXs. I feel like this is something I kind of promised for the longest time, that I feel like I kind of need to do that.
So
you can be the one to handle that.
I could be the one to handle that.
Yeah, we just exceeded the time that we allocated.
Yes,
and I'm sorry, but I will have to leave. So
yeah. Let's go ahead and wrap this up. So I want to thank not only for you guys, you know, sitting down for a second day to work on this, but also spending an extra half an hour beyond the time gate for the meeting. I really appreciate that. So to summarize the workshop stuff that we've done, it's actually been a hell of a lot. So we went through first and defined a lot of org structure. So we defined a lot of team-oriented tasks and breaking that out into actual teams. we defined a couple individual responsibilities and who that goes to. And then, so we have a clear idea of like what would happen for release tagging and PR triaging and review and translations and so on and so forth and marketing. And we could define those teams and come up with better structures for them going forward. But at least having a clear idea of what those responsibilities are is good. We then laid out some Budgie 10 to do, in progress and done things. So we have like a new internal theme, demystifying, that's on the to do for 10, Raven API, network indicator, that sort of stuff, bunch of third-party bits, Bluetooth changes, icon task list refactoring, leveraging the new app indicator in the Budgie run dialog or app indexer. Have a bunch of things that are already on the to-do, things that have already been done ever since the Buddies of Budgie fork. I wouldn't even call it a fork, a transition occurred. I guess technically it was a fork, but then people agreed and then it became a transition. And then we went on to the Budgie 10 goals, right? So this is sort of defining what do we want to accomplish for Budgie 10 still. And so we have a lot of things like nuking WNCK and leveraging more APIs, not necessarily Mutter APIs, but it could be X11 as well for now, in a new library that could then support Wayland and then be used across Budgie 10 and Budgie 11. We have some goals for using Pipewire or supporting Pipewire instead of libgvc or the libgnome volume control. And that would apply to the sound applet as well as the support within Raven for per applications. Better accessibility improvements for tab order, shortcuts, and general cleanup of tab focus. We have some things for Budgie menu and the power dialog that we would like to have, and then some ideas regarding configuration exporting. Have a bunch of ideas for Bluetooth improvements. So adding Bluetooth support, or Bluetooth support already exists, but adding Bluetooth power in either the Bluetooth applet or the power applet, better reconnection and disconnection handling, and making it so we expose a UI for doing that so you don't have to dive into the control center. Using libnm or dbus APIs for the network applet instead of relying on GNOME and the NM applet. And some general de-gnomification, a better handling for EFL and Qt, theme selections, some redoing a Budgie run dialog, Bluetooth possibly using BlueZ directly, which I feel like we sort of somewhat use that, but using it more would be nice. Oh, actually, no, we use GNOME Bluetooth, so getting away from that would be good. And better applet ID handling and making sure that we reduce the conflicts there. All right, and then moving on. So what needs to happen to shift primary development to 11? So this doesn't mean halting 10 entirely, but what it means is like, what are the things that we want to get done in order to be happy with where Budgie 10 is before we spend, say, like 75-80% of our time on 11 and then the rest of it goes to 10. So we don't end up freezing development, but prioritizing 11. So that's Budgie run dialog stuff, better theme handling, libnm, applet ID stuff, application tracking library, because a lot of this does also apply to 11. Power dialog, shared power controls, better accessibility, Budgie menu changes, Bluetooth stuff. Right. Then we got into sort of high objectives or key objectives, you could say, OKRs, for Budgie 11. And we accidentally, well, Sarah and I moved some of the goals over to MVP, but we'll quickly go over some goals that we have. So goals would be like expose mode, better arbitrary icons, like moving them and like, well, being able to move them around. Tutorial, guided tour, more architecture support, tiling, Budgie, extensible Budgie menu, and providing other alternative UXs like a full screen dash. There's a deprecation thing, which this might have already happened. Some general architecture things, and smaller memory footprint, libc agnostic, and so on. So what needs to happen for Budgie 11 MVP? So not including the massive window manager stuff that we have to do. which is probably going to be like half the time spent, if not more. We want to have feature parity for applets, right? We're not going to move from 10 to 11 and 90% of an applet's functionality like icon task list is gone. So that's something we need to focus on. Brand new control center, and then Wayland focused. So this is something we decided on. It's not going to be Wayland only, but the focus is going to be Wayland. And then because of our recognition of some missing hardware support and uncertainty around hardware support going into the future, we will have some form of an X11 fallback. We're not sure what that would be yet, whether that's X Wayland running under Wayland or an X11 X server compositor thing. But it would be everything we do is assuming Wayland, and if it happens to work under X11, that's sort of the fallback. So with that, we have variable refresh rate, proper window tracking, which sort of goes into that one library that we're going to be developing, fractional scaling, which is going to be both through the window or the compositor, as well the window manager / compositor, as well as EFL supporting fractional scaling, and then different monitor refresh rates. And if you're not able to catch all this, I'll have a write-up at some point, so don't worry. Once we formalize some of these details, I'll have a blog post, and then we'll have them on the website and have roadmaps and so on. Advanced tiling capabilities, so quad tiling or vertical, workspace management or architecture support, APIs, sort of the separation between data and presentation layer, multi-monitor panel support, okay, that's a big one that we're all super excited about. Panel and configuration presets, so you would want to select, say, a Mac OS-like experience or a GNOME shell-like experience or the traditional Budgie one or Ubuntu Budgie experience and that sort of thing. Using TOML or some form of, at least a human-readable format instead of G settings, which is like a dconf-based configuration system. So this will allow us to do easy sharing and backups of Budgie presets and all that. Extensible Budgie menu and alternative UXs. These are part of the MVP. So lots of things to do. And that's it. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen in Google Meet. And right, well, that was quite productive. So thank you all for that. Any words that you want to say?
Yeah, just it's not about this one, but I won't be able to make it to the next session that
Okay.
we scheduled. I think it's next weekend, so I won't be there.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was a quite a productive one, and yeah, thank you for the focus.
Yeah, well, I mean, thank you for obviously now spending 41 minutes more than originally planned. So that's genuinely appreciated on everybody's part. So I'm glad we were able to actually like complete all the Budgie 10 and 11 stuff, and we have a good idea of where things are going to go going into the future. And then of course we can expand on that in future workshops. But for workshop 3, I imagine its focus will probably be more around code of conduct and maybe more of the organization stuff. So I don't think it'll be related to Budgie 10 and 11 from a technical perspective. So
I do think it's worth bringing up. Maybe if David is at the next one, it might be worth going over the stuff we have from a technical perspective and seeing if he has any input on it.
Yeah, absolutely. Alrighty. Evan, any final words? You don't have to have any final words, but the floor is yours.
My brain is mush.
Yeah, so is mine. You eat something that is almonds.
But this is really good. I think we covered a ton of ground, and can't wait for the next.
Yeah, it was really nice to also get people's feedback directly from Twitch as well in the community, and it's been really lovely to see people come out of the woodworks with in Matrix as well and jump in and get involved too. So yeah, that's gonna be it. If you missed this at any point in time, it'll be up on the uncut version. Will be up on my personal YouTube, and I'll see what I could do about getting it in a more cut form up on the Buddies of Budgie YouTube channels. So follow us on Fostodon or Twitter if you want to know when that's going to happen. And that's going to be it for today. So Goodbye, everybody.
Thanks,
See
bye.
ya.
Have a good week.